Ms. Hernandez, can you hear me okay?
I can, Commissioner Wilson.
Thank you very much. Got the chance to meet your husband the other day. Seems like a great guy.
Yeah, he is, or I wouldn't have married him. Yeah, he is. Thank you.
Mr. McNeely, this is Chair Aunt Tavares. Can you hear me okay?
Chair Ontiveros, yeah, this is Jess McNeely with staff. Hear you perfectly fine. How do you hear me?
All right. All right, thank you. And I can hear you too. So in a couple of minutes, we'll start our study session.
We should be ready to go.
Okay, thanks.
That's how superficially, I'm sure it's probably complicated. But it wouldn't hurt to look into it.
All right, Mr. McNeely, this is Chair Aunt Taveras. It is 4:00 p.m. So if you would please start our study session.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I've just shared my screen, so we've pulled up your study session agenda to all the commissioners present, and I see 5 as of right now. I just admitted, I just saw Commissioner Best was entering the waiting room, so we now have 6. We now have a quorum with 6 of the planning and zoning commissioners. Welcome to your study session for today, June 28th. And here is your agenda. We're going to kick off with bringing to you items that will be on future public hearings. First item that we would anticipate that would be on your public hearing for next month's public hearing on July 26th, 23 would be sub 2247. That would be a subdivision preliminary plat to amend conditions from a previous preliminary plat approval. Bob Short with our staff is managing this case, and he's got a presentation where he can give you an overview of what's being requested. So Bob, if you want to go ahead and share your screen, and we can discuss this first item.
Thank you, Mr. McNeely. Marty, I believe we need to, it indicates that I am not able to share my screen right now. It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
I've given that to you twice now, so hopefully nothing is happening here. Are you able to do it?
There it goes. Thank
Okay,
you.
yeah, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. This case is one you've seen before a couple of times if you've been here for a while. It's Ranch at the Peak subdivision preliminary plat. And I have some explanation to give as I go along for this. So in this case, the property owner is Cygnus SBL Peaks LLC of Atlanta, Georgia. Representative is Ken Hodson-Pillar of Mogollon Engineering here in Flagstaff, and the zoning is RR2.5. Size of this particular parcel, this particular area is the entire subdivision, which is 185 acres. So this is a new request, and I'll explain that in a minute, but I wanted to go with the request first. It is to approve a new preliminary plat for Ranch at the Peak subdivision, and that is to remove the requirement to pave Roundtree Road and remove the requirement to build a trail on the west side of the subdivision from the old preliminary plat. This is a vicinity map showing the location of Ranch at the Peak subdivision. You can see Fort Valley, Highway 180. It's right north of there, sort of in the middle of that north area. And right before you go out into the forest. And this is an aerial photo showing Ranch at the Peaks. At this point, all 3 phases of Ranch at the Peaks have been approved for final plat. So everything's approved for final plat, and now they're going back to change the preliminary plat, actually to apply for a new preliminary plat to make some changes to that original approval. And this is a copy of the preliminary plat for Ranch at the Peak subdivision. This is some background on it. This original application, that is to modify those conditions at the time, was processed as an amended subdivision preliminary plat in 2002. That was SUB 2737. The commission did hear that case. I believe it's in December, and they recommended the board approve this application. However, when it got to the board and it was moving forward to the hearing, it was determined that an amended subdivision preliminary plat was not supported by the subdivision ordinance. And that's something the county has done for literally decades. But at that time, the board, they indicated to us that we could not process it that way. It had to be processed as a new subdivision preliminary plat, not amended. So that's what we are doing now. And also along that process, we also have been working with the applicant to improve the existing Ranch at the Peak subdivision roads, and that would be sort of in lieu of paving Roundtree Road. These roads were not ever accepted for maintenance by the county, and if they made those improvements, then the county could accept those for maintenance. At this point, we're working on that. We're still working on how that would work exactly moving forward. Some of the paperwork for doing that. So it's not clear at this point if this case will be ready for a hearing next month. We'll see if we can get that done in time. With that, I'll take any questions from the commission.
Mr. Short, this is Chair Ontiveros. I am not, Commissioner Wilson, please go ahead.
Sorry for the delayed response there. Getting my clicker ready here. Mr. Short, I wonder if you could tell me who they are when you're talking about they said that an amended plat map wasn't acceptable.
So whenever something goes to the board of supervisors, it goes through the clerk's office, and then it gets through various reviews, like legal review, for example. And at that point, the clerk got back to us and said that they did not, there was not a provision for an amended subdivision preliminary plat in the subdivision ordinance, and that we would have to reprocess it as a new preliminary plat.
So did that have any impact on all of the previously amended subdivision plats?
Commissioner Wilson, it actually doesn't. I mean, at that point, we have subdivisions that are on the ground. They've been final platted, lots have been sold. So I would say those subdivisions have been vested, legally vested, and that they would not go back at that point. No.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Best.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I seem to remember that the issue that I had with this case was that Roundtree Road had a dust problem and a noise problem, and I understand that we can improve it, but do we have any plans to do any fencing or in some way mitigate the dust issue that the folks directly on Roundtree Road have to deal with?
Commissioner Best, we have not discussed that. Staff has not discussed that. And part of the reason is that it's not really in the subdivision. It's outside the subdivision under the jurisdiction of the Forest Service. So that was not something that has been planned or discussed moving forward.
Have you noticed this in the neighborhood? Do the neighbors know what's going on?
Not yet, not at this point. There was actually a sign that was posted for the board hearing. And honestly, I went out there and I got a big piece of paper and put canceled across the posting once I found out that the board would not support this going forward, or the clerk wouldn't.
Well, I hope that we'll give the neighbors notice so they can chime in on this.
Oh yeah, It will be noticed in the normal fashion.
Okay,
The subdivision ordinance requires everyone within 1,000 feet to be noticed, just like last time. So that's
Yeah.
everyone inside the subdivision and within 1,000 feet of the boundary of the subdivision. So that's a lot of people.
that'll do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Best.
Mr. Short, I'm not seeing any other questions at this time. So Mr. McNeely, if you could please move to item number 2.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item number 2 is AM 23001. We have this on your study session. We wanted to take the opportunity, honestly, with a light study session, being that we had this ordinance drafted to discuss updates. So it'd be an amendment to the zoning ordinance. We want to discuss these updates to the lighting section of the zoning ordinance with you. However, this will not go to public hearing with you next month because we have a study session, or excuse me, a work session scheduled with the Board of Supervisors on this item in August when the board gets back from their break. So I'm going to share my screen now and show you all a little PowerPoint to kind of orient you to some proposed to the proposed amendments, wholesale change to the lighting section of our zoning ordinance. Is everyone seeing my PowerPoint presentation now?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, and there was a copy of the new drafted ordinance in your packet. We were able to get that get the drafts complete with that amendment and out to you. So this was a great opportunity to at least get in your packet, get you all familiar with it, see if you have any questions on it, have any input on it before we do our work session with the board in August. So section 4.3 of the zoning ordinance currently is the outdoor lighting section, will remain the outdoor lighting section. However, this will be a wholesale change to this entire section, and we'll explain why this is a complete removal of the old section 4.3 and a complete update. So unlike some of the other zoning ordinance amendments that you've seen over the years, like the one you saw last month, this isn't a simple strike of some words or some sentences or paragraphs and change. This is a complete change. The city of Flagstaff has already updated their exact version of this ordinance. They are, for all practical purposes, identical. Of course, Flagstaff, the city of Flagstaff, the county, and then many stakeholders from what might be referred to as the dark sky community, the local observatory community, worked with the Naval Observatory and Camp Navajo a couple of years ago to do the JLUS, the Joint Land Use Study, and updating these lighting ordinances for both the city and the county were recommendations that came out of the JLUS. So the city took the lead. They actually held a public open house. They had the ordinance posted at their website, and they got very, very little interest. Of course, the city of Flagstaff has significantly more commercial development that is affected by the lighting ordinance than the unincorporated county does. They have much more of a lighting impact with the commercial development in the city of Flagstaff. So it really was appropriate for them to take a lead and get this adopted first. Also, a recommendation of the Joint Land Use Study was to create a shared lighting specialist position between the city and the county. That position has been created as recommended by the Joint Land Use Study, and that person is in place. And as a matter of fact, the person holding that position, Janice, is currently processing the lighting permits for Coconino County. So we're already relying on this position, and it made all the more sense why one specialist between the city and the county on outdoor lighting, doing both the permitting and the code enforcement on it, would have one consistent ordinance between the city and the county to work with. So great recommendations that came out of a good deliberate planning process of the JLIS. So when we look at significant changes, noticeable changes, kind of at the broad overview level from our old ordinance to the new lighting ordinance, the most significant one is that we're reducing 3 lighting zones across the county to 2. And this is being done by eliminating what currently exists as Zone 3. For those of you who are not familiar with the lighting zone concept, lighting zone 1, the most restrictive, is the zone that is within 2.5 miles of 4 observatory locations. Those observatory locations are the Lowell Observatory that we're all familiar with on Observatory Mesa, the Naval Observatory, which sits just west of the city of Flagstaff, Roden Crater, which is essentially an art installation observatory, which is quite a distance to the northeast of the city of Flagstaff, and then the Discovery Channel Observatory, which sits off of Lake Mary Road, southeast of Flagstaff. Those are the 4 identified, and our GIS system clearly identifies where those are and even draws out this 2.5 mile radius out from each of those. Everything within 2.5 miles of each of these observatory locations is Zone 1, the most restrictive. Zone 2 is where you go out to 2.5 miles from each of those locations, and Zone 2 is everything that is beyond 2.5 miles from those locations. Zone 2, of course, is a little less restrictive than Zone 1. Zone 3, under our current ordinance, is everything beyond 7 miles from those 4 locations. The proposed ordinance update would eliminate Zone 3. And in the case of what the city's adopted, the city has already eliminated Zone 3. We got plenty of time, which is one of the reasons that we wanted to take the opportunity to discuss this ordinance update with the commission this evening. So are there any questions while I've got this slide up on the concept of zones 1, 2, and 3 and eliminating Zone 3?
Mr. McNeely, this is Chair Ontiveros.
Mhm.
I do have a question, but I am going to let Commissioner Wilson go first. I believe I saw his hand first. That's going to be followed by Commissioner Best. And if they haven't asked my question, then I will follow up at that time. So go ahead, Commissioner Wilson.
Sorry about, got my hand up and then couldn't unmute. Sorry about that. So Zone 2 now is everything except Zone 1.
Yep.
Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. Absolutely.
The entire county. So Page is in Zone 2.
Correct. Although the city of Page, inside the city limits of Page, do not fall under our ordinance. They have their own development.
Yeah, I was using it as a geographic reference.
Yep. Yep.
Something over 100 miles away.
Yes. Yeah.
Why are we regulating lighting 100 miles away from these activities?
That's a good question. Honestly, across the entire county, these locations, go to the most restrictive Zone 1, but across the entire county, and I think we have some of this enshrined in our comprehensive plan. Just valuing dark skies are just very valued across the entire county. So for all the reasons, and in the purpose statement, kind of some of the preamble to this ordinance that talks about some of the benefits of dark sky preservation. So that would be the logic. So part of it is the most restrictive zone is to protect these observatories, but then across the entire county, eliminating Zone 3 and becoming a little more restrictive with the rest of that. What was formerly Zone 3 is now becoming Zone 2, is just for the values of the dark skies, which even up in Page, there's regular Star Party events that take place out on Navajo Bridge. So I think embracing some of that visual benefit is something that a lot of the community sees value in.
And So do we believe that now that we have incorporated the entire county of Coconino into zone 2, that a single lighting enforcement officer is going to be able to even have any hope of enforcing these rules?
Absolutely. And actually, we've got, I failed to mention, we've got Mark Stento, who's our code enforcement officer with us, our code enforcement supervisor. And Mark formerly held the lighting specialist position. So Mark, if you're with us, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. And just following up on your explanation of our regional dark sky goals, the health and environmental impacts of LED lighting, specifically the short wavelength light emitted by modern LEDs, is rapidly becoming something of an environmental crisis as efficiency of LEDs continues to evolve. The county, as well as the Grand Canyon, which have taken initiatives to eliminate light pollution and become a dark sky park, as well as other regional federal areas, are attempting to become essentially dark sky sanctuaries in order to limit these health and environmental impacts, as well as preserve astronomical interests in the area. So it's not just about proximity to observatories, not by a long shot. Insofar as enforcement is concerned in the county, with the exception of lighting, we are primarily complaint-based. Now, Janice does do evening work and will in the future, just as I did, be doing lighting audits in these regions. In the past, I had traveled to Page, and while they are incorporated, I'd helped them review their existing lighting code and help enhance their enforcement of it. Part of the directive of that position is to travel to the far corners of the county and not just pursue enforcement, but pursue outreach and education. So it is something that we plan for. It's not off the cuff. We are able to reach out into the farthest areas of the county. Does that answer your question, Chair? Or excuse me, Mr. Wilson?
It does, but I question still whether there's any hope of success here, because I live here in Timberline. I don't need to drive more than half a mile to find half a dozen gross violations of the current lighting code.
Sure.
They're all here within relatively close distance to the observatories that we're trying to protect.
Yep.
So I'm having a hard time believing that adding the entire county to that is going to have any hope whatsoever of success. And while I appreciate the dark skies and understand the support for it, I am curious to hear. I thought I heard you say that the narrow spectrum LEDs are presenting health impacts.
No, not narrow spectrum, general LEDs. So light emitting diodes, modern lighting technology, and we're not referring to narrow spectrum LEDs that the county requires and the city requires. Those are much lower impact. Those are safer. We're talking about your common run-of-the-mill LED, 2700K, 3K, anything above that, certainly including those correlated color temperatures. The short wavelength emissions are pretty substantial. When you look at the spectra of light produced, they produce a lot of blue. There's a big hump in the visible wavelength of light produced. It has health impacts on humans and animals, tricks your body into thinking it's daylight. The emissions of modern LEDs, and we are not talking about narrow band LEDs, which the county and the city require to in large part abate this, have significant impacts on our circadian rhythms. They have been linked to cancer in numerous recent studies, and we know they have extremely negative effects on wildlife as well because of a byproduct of the visible spectra of light produced. It's essentially a byproduct of this technology.
Okay, so it's interesting to me that these LEDs that we're now finding have adverse health impacts are things that have been basically mandated in the past, not outdoors, understanding, but in most workspaces. I know when I built the building I built, I had to have all LED lighting fixtures. I wasn't allowed to have any incandescent fixtures inside my building. So it's interesting to me that as we make these changes, we're actually having adverse impacts on folks' health. And why I think we need to be especially careful as we do this, and perhaps even limit the geographic nature of the broadness of our scope, so that we don't adversely impact people unintentionally or without any real value. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Wilson. Commissioner Best.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm proud of this. We've been working on this for a long time. I think we are sort of culturally ahead of the game here. I know that the city and county just went to a conference in Albuquerque and presented. We are the first dark sky city. The dark skies, we've got 5 million people coming here a year to experience the Grand Canyon, the wide open spaces of the West, and dark skies are definitely part of that. So I really support this. I have a question about, in particular, residential light trespass. Now, this is it's an education process that's going to go on for years and years and decades and decades. Light trespass and dark sky, I would say light pollution is increasing all over the world. It's one of those things that takes a long, long time, decades probably, to turn a corner and educate people. I have heard from city planners that in the city, light trespass, which is, I would generally define that as my neighbor has a bare light bulb that I can see, is something that is against code and can be corrected if you've got the nerve to, I suppose, plan A is go talk to your neighbor, plan B is you could make a complaint to the city. So my general question is light trespass and more particularly residential lighting. Does this apply to residences? And if there is light trespass, excuse me, can you make a complaint and get it corrected? So that's my question.
I'll go ahead and field this one. This is Mark with County Code Enforcement. So the current code, it has very problematic language. The current county zoning ordinance has very problematic language related to trespass, specifically with the use of as much as possible, confining the light to the property from which it originates as much as possible. The proposed updated ordinance and the current city ordinance modify that to all outdoor light fixtures, including motion sensing lighting, shall be located, aimed, and shielded. So the direct illumination from the fixture shall be confined to the property boundaries of the source. Now, from a real world enforcement standpoint, it can be challenging. We went through this back and forth with Chris Lugenbuehl, and we were considering illuminance standards along with the then zoning code manager at the city for measuring trespass. And the summary is that we would need something quantifiable in terms of evidence, and would have to be something well above ambient levels. So if you had improper shielding, that would be the easiest way to address it. Now, the challenge here is we have a lot of existing non-conforming properties in the county with lighting. A lot of people don't change their lights. Now, technically, when you change a bulb out to an LED, it constitutes changing the entire light, but we don't really rigidly enforce that because, well, frankly, it'd be very hard to do. But what that means is you may have someone with a legacy incandescent fixture with an exposed bulb that may not be unlawful by itself because it was, at the time it was installed, it was lawful. Now you're forced to deal with a trespass complaint via an illuminance standard. And again, that's problematic. So the nuances of enforcing trespass can be a bit tricky. The short of it is I would want an egregious case before I'd want to take it in front of a hearing officer and press for a citation. And we're talking probably 1 or 10 lux, I would say, would be roughly the minimum I'd want to get at, well above ambient levels. That's probably more detailed than you wanted. Does that answer your question, Commissioner?
It does in a way. I mean, a lot of this is a long-term educational process where neighbors aren't even vaguely aware of what light trespass means. But I think over time, especially as we are working on new developments, new construction, as the word gets out, and what you said sounds reasonable. Nobody wants to be that jerky neighbor who's lighting everybody up.
And
No pun intended, because their lights are too bright. But at the same time, we want to make progress toward dark skies, because it's a great value in our county. It's great
Well-
value everywhere, but in particular in a county like ours.
and to
So
further
yeah, that
clarify-
kind of answers my question.
Well, and to further clarify, we generally approach these with a friendly contact and an awareness, which is why we had some materials per the MIS grant specifically developed to address this. So we can make that contact and educate, 9 times out of 10 in these situations. And most of the time that at least allows for some level of abatement.
Yeah, and that's totally appropriate. I mean, as Commissioner Wilson is expressing, if we push too hard, we're going to get pushed back. I think most people support the value of dark skies as long as it's done reasonably. We've been at this a long time. We've proven that buildings that we can provide safe lighting and be consistent with dark skies. No question about that anymore. So yeah, that answers my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Best. Commissioner Ruggles.
Thank you. I would like to say that this is a culmination of over 10 years of effort that I and numerous other people have been involved with. And I think what we're seeing is extremely well thought out. It is something that is very closely based on the JLUS study that the Navy did. And I think that it addresses the problems that have been identified over the last 10 years. Mark Stento and Sot Best and Jess McNeely have spoken very clearly relative to this. I believe that I am only following up their comments on this. One thing I would like to add to this is relative to lighting zone 3, the number of people in the Page area, the Greenhaven area, Marble Canyon, who want to have dark skies as a part of the attraction to what they rely on from tourism is very important to those people, and they have expressed this to us over the years. Now, one other thing that no one else has mentioned is the fact that, yeah, so we're out in the far corner of the county and we have lighting zone 3 still in existence, and you've got 100 acres and 1 million lumens of light. That constitutes a sky glow problem, which is one of the biggest problems that the Naval Observatory has, along with other observatories. Sky glow from Phoenix is a problem, and that is why the Navy, in their study, requested the changes that we are seeing in this ordinance, because the Navy realized that even with changes that we make to the dark sky ordinance, as Phoenix grows, the problem may eventually get to the point where it will compromise the mission of the Naval Observatory. And if you want a good way to waste taxpayer money, move the Naval Observatory somewhere else. And then the question is, where are you going to put it? So that would be my answer to, well, let's keep zone 3. I wouldn't want to do that. Other than that, I think I only had one comment, and perhaps Mark could kind of enlighten me on this. On our draft on page 16, the outdoor light output, the next to the last sentence in the paragraph above the 4 points made states that in part, pedestrian lighting installed on public rights of way or private street tracks in accordance with Title 13, Engineering Design Standards and Specifications for New Infrastructure. Title 13 is a part of the Flagstaff City Code for lighting. We do not use that. If we're going to put something in there like that, I suppose you could identify it as in accordance with the City of Flagstaff Lighting Code Title 13, or just eliminate Title 13, Engineering Design Standards and Specifications for New Infrastructure. And I think that I just question having something in there where we are saying we'll do something in accordance with part of a code from a different jurisdiction. Now, if Mark could answer that, I would appreciate at least some input, because I think there are several ways of dealing with this that would not compromise what we are attempting to do in the draft. So thank you very much.
Commissioner
Thank you,
Ruggles, that
Commissioner Ruggles. I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Stinto.
the Title 13 reference is likely just an overlook on our, and we attempted to go through and eliminate the internal references to city code. But we may have missed some stuff. So I'm sure Jess and I will review that.
Yeah.
And go from there.
Yep. And my involvement with this has been over a period of 10 years. And that's why I read this stuff rather thoroughly. I've been very closely involved with it from the start, and to a lesser degree now that we're at this point. You and others, all I can say is you've done a terrific job with this. That's a very, very minor point. The rest, hard to do better.
Hey, Commissioner Ruggles, this is Jess with staff. If you could please email myself and Mark exactly where you're seeing that, because both he and I went through this. So if you could point us exactly to that point, I think I understand. Certainly understand the point you're making there, and we can get that fixed. This is exactly why we wanted to hold the study session.
Yep.
With y'all, so we can get a little bit of review. So we appreciate it.
And that's exactly why I have it highlighted, and I will send you the text of that with a highlight on it, so there's no problem identifying it. So we'll do.
Sincerely appreciate it.
Commissioner Best, do you have additional comments?
I just wanted to recognize Commissioner Ruggles for the work that he has done over probably the better part of a decade. He and Chris Lugenbuehl and a number of others in Flagstaff, Mark Stinto, have really been on the cutting edge of this, not locally, not nationally, worldwide. And I think it's pretty darn cool. We're the first, I believe, the first dark sky city. It's a wonderful value that we represent. A lot of very hard work over many, many years has gone into getting to where we are now. And I just want to recognize these folks. Thank you very much for your great work.
Thank you, Commissioner Best. And I agree with you that the recognition is very well earned by all of the individuals that you just mentioned. Commissioner Wilson, your hand is raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wasn't sure whether we were just talking about those first two sections or the entire document. Jess, are we?
So Travis and Commissioner Wilson, we still have the slide that I have up right now. We were just pointing out the major change of reducing from 3 lighting zones to 2, and obviously that was worthy of a little bit of discussion. But we have a little more presentation to give. So if you have questions that are coming out of other parts of that draft ordinance we sent you, you might see if we cover it, and then in some of these other.
Standing by.
We got a few more slides. Okay, thanks.
Okay, Mr. McNeely, this is Chair Antiveros. For the record, could you state the major difference between zone 2 and zone 3?
Absolutely. And we, zone 2, in our current code, is, everything between 2.5 miles and then 7 miles, from these 4 observatories listed. And it is less restrictive. We have another slide that we'll get to where we pull up the charts, that actually show the lumens per acre regulations, and the difference between what falls under our current code and what is proposed. So do you think that might help, pointing out the actual quantifiable differences in
I
lumens
sure
per
do.
acre? Okay.
Yep, I sure do. So I will stay tuned as well. Please go ahead.
Okay. So just for illustration purposes, this is the city's lighting zone map. And you can see here in the legend, lighting zone 1, the darker, and within the city limits, you see where that is closest to Observatory Mesa, the Lowell Observatory, and then the Naval Observatory, and then lighting zone 2 is the entire rest of the city. So again, we already have lighting zones plugged into our GIS available to the public through our parcel viewer. And if and when these updates are done, anyone can click on their property in the future in parcel viewer and know which lighting zone they are in. Other major changes, we've already referred to it in the discussion, but there's a change to preferred lighting source. Our current code states specifically in it that the preferred lighting source is low pressure sodium, LPS. That is a completely obsolete technology. So we have been limping along, so to speak, with our existing code by basically translating to LED, the more current technology, and of course, as has been discussed, the narrow spectrum amber LED. So the updated ordinance lists the preferred lighting source as narrow spectrum amber LED, and then to get very technical, as Mark was discussing before, that narrow spectrum is between peak wavelengths of 589 and 595 nanometers, as seen on this graph here. And actually, this graph is in the draft ordinance and would go in with the definition section of the lighting ordinance. Any questions on this major change of the preferred lighting source being low pressure sodium in the old ordinance and updating that to narrow spectrum amber LED? Okay. The next major changes that I'll point out is some of the shielding. So this is the
Mr.
chart.
Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Ruggles had his hand raised.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead, Commissioner Ruggles.
Yeah, just one quick comment on that. The recently, over the last several years, the availability of narrow spectrum amber LEDs has increased substantially. 10 years ago, lighting like this that would suit the needs of our lighting ordinance was very close to being something that was made of unobtainium. It just wasn't out there. That's changed quite a bit in the last 10 years, and especially over the last several years. So just so you know a little bit about it ahead of time.
Thank you. So on with major changes. This is the shielding standards table out of the draft ordinance, table 4.3b for lighting zones 1 and 2. Of course, lighting zone 3 would not exist as proposed in the updated ordinance. And Mark, I don't know if you if you had any insight on this chart. I hate to get detailed with a chart on a PowerPoint slide. This was it's in the draft ordinance that was in your packet. But this chart does break down between the 2 lighting zones, 1 and 2. And then at the top of the chart is your commercial, industrial, and multifamily development. Of course, we don't have near the amount of that type of development in the unincorporated county as what the city has. And then that is further broken into the discussion of classes 1, 2, and 3 lighting. Those of us who are a little more familiar with classes 1, 2, and 3 lighting understand what the differences of those outdoor lighting classes are based on their purpose. And then you see in the chart what has to be FS, fully shielded, and which ones are prohibited and which ones are allowed. And then further down the chart, we get into the single family and duplex residential. That is what we have a lot of in the unincorporated county. And you see between lighting zone 1 and 2, where you have fully shielded, allowed, and then prohibited fixtures. So Mark, any other insight that you could give on this chart when it comes to discussing shielding within the different land uses, for the different classes of lighting, and then within the 2 different lighting zones?
Sure. The lighting class is predominantly applied to commercial, as you noted, Jess. So the current county ordinance is a few generations behind the cities. And the current county ordinance that is being replaced does allow some unshielded class 3 light in zone 2, as long as the luminaire itself is under 2,500 lumens. We have that's obviously been changed. Beyond that, the elimination of zone 3, where the most unshielded illumination was allowed under the current county ordinance, is going to have the biggest effect. Other than that, no, Jess, I think you hit most of it. I should note that on the residential side, the current county ordinance does allow a rather substantial amount of unshielded light, especially from motion sensitive fixtures, and that has been eliminated as well to the 700 lumen limit you see for single family.
So, Madam Chair, I see that Commissioner Wilson has his hand raised.
Yes, please go ahead, Commissioner Wilson.
Actually, Mark just touched on my question. As we have reduced lighting, especially in residential neighborhood areas, there's been a concern about safety. And one of the suggested solutions to those concerns was that motion sensitive or motion controlled lighting fixtures were a good solution, because they would only activate when necessary for personal safety purposes. And it appears that now in lighting zone 1, there's absolutely none of those allowed. Am I understanding that correctly?
You're understanding correctly. There's no unshielded light allowed. Now, the problem with regulating motion sensitive units is they can be set to a wide variety of settings. They can set to remain on for an extended period of time. There's no way to really regulate and control that. Someone can change it the minute you walk away. So you can't really regulate them. Zone 1 is within 2.5 miles of Naval Observatory, Flagstaff Station, and the interferometer. No unshielded light is allowed in those zones. There's no provision specific to motion sensitive fixtures as well, for, again, the regulatory reasons I mentioned.
Okay. It says, I'm looking at table 4.3 alpha, motion sensing outdoor light fixtures, fully shielded, maximum 0. I think we're eliminating an important personal security potential there that a lot of people have been told is the alternative to going darker overall. And I just wanted to express a concern. So thank you.
This is Chair Ontiveros. I want to make sure that I'm understanding this correctly. Are we talking about, on the motion sensor, are we talking about lighting zone 1 or lighting zone 2, or both?
What I'm seeing is zone 1.
Okay, so then if I may follow up, is it my understanding that motion censored lighting is still allowed in zone 2?
That's what I'm seeing on the chart.
Okay. And that's correct, Mr. Stinto? I just want to be sure I'm understanding this correctly.
To my knowledge, the ordinance doesn't specifically regulate motion sensitive lighting in that it allows more light or unshielded light for motion sensitive units. So there's no specific allowance enabling unshielded motion sensitive units, which I think is what Commissioner Wilson is alluding to. You can have motion sensitive units, they just need to meet the shielding and lumen requirements for the area as well. So that comes back to a shielding question.
Gotcha.
And
Yeah.
not necessarily a motion sensitive question. There's no reason an unshielded light enhances security beyond a fully shielded light, and there's data to back that up.
Right. And like personally, I have shielded motion censored lighting. So I would agree with you, Mr. Stinto, in that. So I just wanted to be sure that I was understanding this correctly.
I'm sorry, Chair Antonis, could I ask Mr. Stentos one more question then, because
Of course.
this table looks pretty clear to me. If you could refer, it's on page 8 of the packet or page 4 of the lighting ordinance. And it's about in the middle of the page. It says motion sensing outdoor light fixtures, fully shielded, maximum is 0. So that tells me there can be no motion sensing lights whatsoever outdoors, fully shielded or not. Am I incorrectly reading that?
No, and I see that too. That is what the city ordinance says as well. Now, the intent was to not permit exceptions. There's a current exception in the county's ordinance that allows more unshielded light for motion sensitive light fixtures. I can't speak to that specific line item. That end note does have a timer on there. I think that may be something in the ordinance that we carried over from the cities that was intended to address, again, unshielded motion sensing light fixtures. But from an enforcement standpoint, we wouldn't treat a motion sensitive fixture any different than a regular fixture, in the sense it would still have to meet shielding requirements.
Well, and this one's saying fully shielded and still 0.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. We'll look at that.
Okay, it would seem a fully shielded motion sensor fixture that has a 5-minute timer should be authorized even in zone 1 for security purposes.
Assuming it meets shielding requirements.
Fully shielded, right.
And lumen cap requirements. And that may be where the concern is, the lumen cap requirements. I need to look more closely at what the, and I was involved in the development of this code, but I don't recall that specific component in there. So we'll have to look at that a little bit more closely there and see. But I understand what you're saying.
Thank you.
Okay, and this is Chair Taveras, and thank you, Mr. Stinto, for recognizing that clarification needs to be brought to that, because I do want to underscore the point that Commissioner Wilson is making regarding the safety issue. I know that we have all acknowledged it, but in these very rural communities, specifically the Red Lake area, one that I'm talking about, we do need, I mean, you do need some lighting, because there's no street lighting in the city of Flagstaff. You know, you have street lights, you have light coming from other sources, but in these very rural areas, you're pretty much, in some areas, you're your only light source. And I will say that fully shielded motion censored lighting is a safety issue. And so I don't want to see that eliminated in any way. So I will just leave it there. Go ahead, Mr. McNeely.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. And I went ahead and forwarded the slide. So we were here discussing shielding standards, but then thanks, Commissioner Wilson, for discussing 4.3A. We now have table 4.3A from the draft ordinance. That's in the lower right-hand corner of your screen here. And what we were just discussing right here was right here that I'm pointing to with my cursor, the motion sensing outdoor light fixtures fully shielded, and showing a 0 in lighting zone 1. So thanks for pointing that out. That's certainly something that's good input that we can look back at that. The
Mr.
point of,
McNeely, can I chime in real quick?
yeah, sure.
So reading the city's ordinance, and I'm assuming ours reads the exact same way, that the actual, so the actual code for single family and duplex light lumen caps reads combined maximum for fully and partially shielded fixtures and fixtures not mounted to the building or canopy, excluding motion sensing outdoor light fixtures. So what that means is, in zone 2, and I do recall this, which would encompass most of the county, there is an additional 2,000 lumens on top of the 5,000 lumen cap allotted to motion sensing fixtures.
Mhm.
So there is some additional illumination allowed in those areas to address those specific safety concerns. There is not in zone 1. You're tied to the 1,500 lumen cap period for the property because of the sensitivity of those zones. So that is a correct read on that, and that is how the city's reads, but there's more for outside of that in the rest of the county.
Thank you, Mr. Stinto, for pointing that out.
Okay. So Mark, from what you're saying here is, as I'm pointing with, if you can see my cursor on here, even in lighting zone 1, this total cap, this 1,500, let's see, combined maximum for fully and partially shielded fixtures and fixtures not mounted, excluding, okay. So that is pointing out a big distinction between lighting zone 2, which is the vast majority of the county, which could have the motion sensing outdoor fixtures with a 2,000 lumen cap.
In addition to the 5,000.
In addition to their 5,000 here, right? Got
Correct.
it.
So that within that 1,500 lumens in zone 1, it could be motion sensitive units. I don't know if that would be sensible in that particular case, because you might as well just have a fully shielded unit you turn on at will. But you could certainly have motion sensitive units within that lumen cap.
Got it.
We would not enforce on that as long as you're within the 1,500 lumens. You're just not allowed additional lumens for additional outdoor light fixtures.
For motion.
Excuse me. Motion sensitive.
Got it.
Outdoor light fixtures.
Okay. Thanks, Mark.
Mhm.
The reason I put these two charts on one slide here for the commissioners is to point out that table 4.4 that I'm pointing to here in the upper left-hand corner of this slide is from our old ordinance. It's the maximum total outdoor light output standards as measured in lumens per acre or lumens per residence. And of course, we have lighting zones 1, 2, and 3 in the columns here. So contrasting that with the proposed table 4.3 maximum total outdoor light output standards, you can see we've eliminated lighting zone 3 in here, and you can start taking a look at the difference in the lumen count per acre in lighting zones 1 and 2 for the different uses, be it commercial or single family. So like in lighting zone 1, total unshielded in our old code was capped at 25,000 lumens per acre. Proposed in the new ordinance, we see right here, the new translation is 17,500. Pretty significant drop, as I understand it, in our, just within lighting zone 1, the most restrictive lighting zone, with single family residences in the old code, lighting zone 1, you were limited to 10,000. And I think, Mark, this is 10,000 that's per residence, not per acre. And then when we look at the proposed updated code, it's a little bit different, but the combined maximum total for single family residential is dropped from 10,000 to 1,500. We don't title it as per residence, but rather per lot or parcel. So that's kind of relative, some of the differences in maximum output between the old chart and the new chart. Any questions or discussion
Jesse,
on this
If,
one?
if I can elaborate on that too.
Yeah,
too,
please.
I'd like to note that during the development of the city's code, that 1,500 lumens was certainly based on the extensive development that's going on in the Zone 1 area, especially around the Naval Observatory Flagstaff Station. But that number was very specific to the data developed by Fred and company with the Navy in terms of what they would need to reduce it to keep illumination levels under control around Naval Observatory Flagstaff Station specifically. A large portion of which is of course in the city as well, or at least a portion of which is in the city. So it's not arbitrary. That number came from the Navy.
Okay. Any other insight, Mark, before we take questions here on these two charts? There's some differences. To a certain extent, it feels a little bit in some cases like measuring apples to oranges, but we can try to make it apples to apples as much as possible here on basically translating, hey, what's the change? What's the impact?
So you'll notice the low pressure sodium specification in the existing commercial code. You also notice that a substantial amount, basically all white light, at either 6% or 3% LPS, or excuse me, unshielded, was permitted in zones 2 and 3 respectively. And all non-low pressure sodium or non-amber was permitted in zones 2 and 3. Obviously, we're eliminating zone 3, so that's irrelevant. But zone 2, all class 2 illumination has to be narrowband amber, essentially. There is a limit on the amount of white light available on those parcels as well. But again, that's predominantly based on illumination class. Class 1 illumination allows for white light over entryways, over public eating areas, etc. So the code does allow for white light in areas where color rendition is needed, but basically requires a narrow band amber. And we know LPS is an antiquated technology and no longer being produced at this point, does require narrow band amber for all general safety and security applications. And that's generally speaking perfectly fine for those purposes. So I hope that clarifies somewhat.
Commissioner Wilson, your hand is raised.
Thank you. Mark, I understand you said, well, we wouldn't enforce no motion sensed lights. I'm sorry to go back to that one. If we're not going to enforce it, it shouldn't be in the code. This is our opportunity to make it correct. And I would encourage you to review that. And you don't need to respond. That's just my thought.
No, I'll clarify. I was saying that if they were within their 1,500 lumens, we would not care whether that was a motion sensitive unit that was producing that 1,500 lumens or not. It would be irrelevant.
Except the chart says 0.
There could be a footnote added perhaps to clarify that.
Yeah. 0 means 0 to me. I'm just saying we could clarify that. Second of all, okay, so we're going to go to all narrowband, and we're going to go to about 1/8 of the allowed light in zone 1 for a residential property. And we're eliminating the opportunity if we have an auxiliary dwelling unit on that same property for additional lighting for that particular facility, right? If I'm understanding this correct?
Yeah, there wouldn't be additional light allowed for an ADU. Is that what you're saying?
Right.
Right.
Does that doesn't make sense to me that if a primary residence on a property needs, and that's what we're basically saying here, at least 1,500, or we're allowing up to 1,500, which is a huge cut from what's currently allowed. And then we're saying, well, wait, no, you got to cut that in half too if you have an ADU. I question whether that is a reasonable expectation. And I understand the importance of the Naval Observatory. I have a top secret clearance and I have been an end user of their product. But I think there has to be some balance here. And I'm concerned that also requiring the narrow spectrum LED lighting in residential situations, have we have we looked at what the difference in the cost for that requirement is to an average residence? And has that been factored into any of this decision making? Is that data available for us to look at?
We're not requiring narrow spectrum amber for residential applications. That's for commercial class 2 lighting specifically. So there's no narrow band amber requirement. Now, that being said, phosphor converted amber and narrow band amber fixture availability, as I believe Commissioner Ruggles suggested prior, has increased substantially. And you know, I have phosphor converted amber lights at my place. They're available for a couple dollars a piece online. Those run about 2,200K. There are some additional restrictions in some city developments within Zone 1 that's outside of our scope here today. But in that particular case, they are using phosphor converted amber. But to be clear, the lighting classes and the narrowband amber requirement are not relevant to residential properties. Insofar as the illumination on single family residences is concerned, mostly where, and one, it's very important that we're consistent with the city in this, because we share a lot of Zone 1 with it. And it's important that when you cross the street, the standards remain the same. A lot of where this is being applied is new development in the area. The city and the county will be working with building division to ensure new builds meet these requirements. Any lighting that is in that area, in Zone 1, in any area, but and right now with this conversation, Zone 1, that has lighting that meets the current code will be allowed to continue to have that lighting unless they significantly update it. In that case, they will have to meet that code. Now that, you know, like I said, you know, that number was determined based on the development that was going on in that zone to protect the Naval Observatory's mission. City didn't have a lot of pushback on it. They're enforcing it. You know, I don't know that I have much more to say about it other than that, but I certainly hope that answers some of your questions regarding the spectral restrictions or lack thereof on residential properties.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, this is Jess. No other questions on this slide on the maximum output change. We're going to move on to discuss a little bit of the permitting process. We would be updating our permitting process to align with the city, kind of updated, more detailed worksheet as I understand it. For those of you who aren't familiar with the details, there is a separate lighting permit required for commercial development. Okay, if you are building a commercial building and you got outdoor lighting, which actually would be required by code for your entryway, your exterior entryway into a building, any commercial development is going to require a separate lighting permit. Now that is different from single family residential development, which of course is the vast majority of what we work with in the unincorporated county. When you build a new single family home, you don't get a separate lighting permit. However, as has been pointed out, you are still required to conform. You're still required to comply with this ordinance. That's going to be a lot easier to work with on new builds. We know where our high new build areas are in both the city and the county, particularly in Zone 1. Many of those developments are already working within, trying to be as dark sky compliant as possible. So we will be working with our building division and with our building inspectors for field checks as new residences get built, that we can advise on, even though they don't require a separate lighting permit for their single family residence in the county. We will be working with the inspectors to ensure what gets installed actually meets the code. So any questions on the permitting process that will get updated to align with the city and with a new code?
Mr. McNeely, this is Chair Antiveros. What is the reasoning for a separate lighting permit required for commercial as opposed to none for a single family residence?
Madam Chair, that's a good question. I think that's the county had never required a separate lighting permit for a single family residence, although the lighting code could always be enforced. I think it's a matter of a little more simplicity for single family development. When we know with commercial development or any non-residential development, if you think of like a church or a school parking lot, they're typically going to have lighting associated with any of those non-residential developments. So you anticipate more outdoor lighting with commercial development, and developers, builders, architects, engineers are when they're doing designing and building of a commercial project. That's a bit of a norm that they expect in our county and certainly in the city as well. Mark, any other comments you would give on that, on why there's no separate lighting permit required for single family residents from your perspective?
Oh, man, it'd be like getting blood from a stone from single family residents. We don't expect residents to understand the permitting process. The permitting process requires cut sheets, lumen calculations, site maps, stuff that is very common for commercial development, obviously. The impact is also 100 to 1. You're looking at hundreds or a few thousand lumens on a residence versus hundreds or millions of lumens on a commercial property, even, you know, the few that exist in Coconino County. So the scope is vastly different. We don't want to burden residents with the cost and the duty to do that. We just want them to do their best to comply. Commercial also, because of the scope, the permitting process allows us an additional check where we can perform an inspection before issuance of a certificate of occupancy in the case of new development, or we can establish a record of the existing lighting. So if lighting gets changed, and the reality of the commercial exterior lighting world is that lighting gets changed on a whim. LEDs may last for 5 to 20 years, the diodes themselves, but the drivers behind them last maybe 1 to 3. So LED lighting is changed out frequently because of those components failing. They change hands, etc. New lighting permits required when they come and replace the lighting. So that's the long version.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Ruggles?
Yeah, I'm going to add just a little bit of a comment to that. If anyone has any question about the amount of lighting that residential contributes to this, that was identified in the study that the Navy did, which is a part of the JLIS study that is out there. It's a simple matter of pulling that up and reading it, and you'll find out that it's just as Mark said, it's a very low percentage from residential lighting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Ruggles. Mr. McNeely, it is about 5:15 right now, and I know that you indicated that we're not going to be hearing this case, sometime until after August. And we still have items left on the study session.
Absolutely.
Do you think that there might be a good breaking point that maybe we can say, okay, we're leaving off here on this draft and pick it up at another study session, so we're still timely in completing the study session prior to the hearing?
Absolutely, Madam Chair. I only had one slide left, and I can email this packet out. The only discussion of this slide was just like everything under the zoning ordinance. If you were permitted at any point in time as legal, you retain your legal non-conforming use rights. And then we have the triggers in here on this slide, broadly, generally speaking, on what would require fully conformance of a property to the new standards. At what point do they have to conform to the new standards? But I can email this out to the commissioners. I would welcome individual replies back to myself. And of course, I'd be sharing them with Mark. He's much better at the details on this than I am. As we look to make some tweaks, make some edits based on input here to what we can put in this draft ordinance before we get it to the Board of Supervisors for their work session. And of course, we would bring it back to the commission at least once more for another work session based on the comments we got this evening. So any other parting shots? There's not much left in your study session agenda. but any other parting comments on this item?
Commissioner Wilson, go ahead.
I have a number and I'm not going to give you them all. in
Okay.
Respect to everyone's time here. But Jess, you just said previously permitted lighting remains legal. Yet
Yep.
on page 15 of our packet, item number 2 says non-conforming outdoor lighting shall be subject to, and this is another example of section 3.13, shall not be used after May 1st, 2006. So there's a
Okay.
section in here right now that directly
Right.
conflicts with what you just told us. So that'll have to be looked at, and I look forward to the next time we hear this. I'll keep my markups handy. I've got a number of more questions. Thank you.
Well, Mark, that's one we'll have to look at it. It's the magic year of 2006.
Special year, I think that was a reference to old Mercury vapor lights.
Yeah.
They had a sundown in an early version of the code, and that probably just didn't get cleaned up.
Okay. Madam Chair, if you like, we can move on now and wrap up the rest of your study session.
Yeah, why don't we do that? Thank you, Mr. McNeely.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen here of your study session agenda. Thanks for the discussion. That was this really was a targeted opportunity. It just coincided that we had gotten some staff work done on the draft and had a light study session anyways. So appreciate the opportunity to get that out to the commissioners, and appreciate the thoughtful comments, and look forward to a lot more. I would point out next on your study session agenda that we have 2 conditional use permits listed here that we see right now as being eligible for administrative renewal. Were there any comments or questions from any of the commissioners on item number 1 here, CUP 2329, or item 2, CUP 2330?
Mr. McNeely, as the managing member of case number C, or of the property owner, specifically Red Lake LLC, for CUP 23029, I will have to recuse myself from any comment on that one.
Okay.
And I have no problem administrative renewal with number 2. Those are my comments. Commissioner Wilson?
I guess tonight is the night of connections or non-conflicts here. In CUP 23030, I am the leaseor of the 40-acre parcel, with the exception of the cell tower site that is subject to this particular CUP. I control the rest of the property other than the 75-foot perimeter around that particular cell tower. And I did check with county legal earlier today, and it is not determined to have been a conflict of interest. So I will do an informed opinion as a commissioner, not as an individual.
Okay. So I realize, Madam Chair, you're recused on the one, but I see no other hands up wanting to discuss either one of these admin renewals. So we'll move on your agenda. Moving up to our department update. First thing that I would tell you on a department update that is not listed on your agenda is that Marty Hernandez, who you all know well because you get a lot of information from her, may well, strong rumor, may well be retiring at some point here in the near future, which we all aspire to at some point here, in a happy, healthy state. And her replacement is now Charlene Slaughter. And Charlene is with us, actually sitting right with Marty and helping Marty run the meeting this evening. As a matter of fact, you all got an email from Charlene earlier today, and you can anticipate more interactions from Charlene in the future, as she will be taking over these duties that Marty's done so well in the past. But we're not saying goodbye to Marty yet. We'll have opportunity to do that in the future. Marty's going to be with us for a few more months. We were very fortunate to have a little bit of overlap. So welcome to Charlene and Marty. We're not saying goodbye yet. So Madam Chair, any commissioners, any comments on our updating of So a few little changes on our administrative staff.
No, this is Chair Aunt Taveras, and the only comment that I would make would be to, on behalf of the commission, welcome Shar, and we look forward to working with you. And glad, Marty, that you're going to be around for a little bit longer.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mhm.
Thank you.
And with that, Mr. McNeely, let's go ahead and continue through the rest of the items.
Okay, so Madam Chair, item 1 here is reminder, you all see this every month, that we continue to partner with the Route 66 Brownfields EPA grant. We will highlight here that any applicants, if there's anybody on the meeting or if any of the commissioners are aware of any potential applicants, they need to apply for this grant by August. It's coming up on us pretty soon here, August of 23. Item number 2 is your monthly reminder that we continue to work with the City of Flagstaff on the Flagstaff Regional Plan. I believe we are in the process of getting what will become an advisory committee together for that regional plan. Of course, Melissa is our primary point of contact for the Flagstaff Regional Plan update, but several others of us also participate with that effort as much as possible. And the third item here is that we do continue to work to update our comprehensive plan. Of course, the Board of Supervisors approved the public participation plan for the comprehensive plan update on May 23rd. Most of our work right now is going with what's called the core planning team, which goes across the entire county organization staff. So all the other departments across the county that have representatives with the core planning team as we gather some data and do some analysis. And again, Melissa Shaw is the project manager and the lead for the comprehensive plan update. Any questions from any of the commissioners? I see we do have one hand up on those three items.
Wilson? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm the all about let's keep things brief. So I would like to suggest to the staff and committee that perhaps these staff updates like this could be as detailed as necessary in the report, and we could ask if anyone has any questions. If not, could save some time perhaps, since basically we're reading what's on the piece of paper. Thank you.
Good recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Wilson. Mr. McNeely, go ahead and hit the Board of Supervisors update, please.
Okay, just a quick update. On June 13th, the board approved AM 22007, the medical marijuana hours of operation as recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission. So that is now an approved amendment to the zoning ordinance. We also want to let you know that ZC 2214, that was the Greenhaven zone change that was recommended for denial by the Planning and Zoning Commission. That was withdrawn by the applicant, so that will not go to the Board of Supervisors. Any questions from anyone on items before the Board of Supervisors? Seeing none, Madam Chair, I would then get us up to Commission Staff Roundtable, and wanted to let everyone know, congratulations to Commissioners Williams and Ruggles. They were both reappointed as of yesterday to the Planning and Zoning Commission up to June 30th of 2027. Wanted to just give the opportunity here, in addition to any other roundtable items, if any of the commissioners had any additional feedback on the APA planning official training videos.
Mr.
Okay,
McNeely, I'm not seeing any hands raised, or no, Commissioner Best.
Yeah, Jess, would you please stay on? We can take our break.
Absolutely, I can stay on.
Okay, then if there's no other questions, comments at this time, why don't we take about a 5-minute break and we'll start the hearing at 5:30.
Okay.
Jess, you hear me?
I hear you perfectly fine.
It looks like if I lose it.
So Commissioner Best, right after I said I hear you perfectly fine, now you're coming across garbled, so now I'm not hearing it.
Let me try calling. Yes, can you hear me now?
Commissioner Best, I hear you. I can hear you a little. It is a little broken up.
Try to call.
Yeah, I'm definitely not hearing you.
Hi. Yes, can you hear me?
I could hear it when you said, "Can you hear me?" Amazingly, that's the only thing I've been able to hear you say, Commissioner Best. It sounds like when you, yeah, maybe that's a little better.
Can you hear me now?
Wow, I hear you perfectly now. Yeah,
Okay. We only have 6 commissioners, is that correct?
correct. Yes, Commissioner Walsh. She actually messaged to our staff, and she had to drop off, and we do not anticipate her to come back on. So appreciate you being here for quorum.
Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yep, you're fine.
All right, I will do my very best to hang in here. I'm in my sister's house on San Juan Island,
Oh, wow.
up in the north of Seattle. So my computer is telling me that I have a lot of internet connection, but I lost you guys for a while there. So
Okay.
I will do my best to stay with you.
Well, whatever position you're in right now, we're hearing you perfectly fine.
Don't move, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Well, I'm
Okay.
going to move very quickly and go take a very short break, and I'll be back. And this should be a pretty short one, right?
You just one case. Yep.
Yeah, that should be easy. Okay.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.
Stop, tell the orc is high for us, will you?
All right.
Hey, Jess,
I'm sorry. I have to be in
Yeah.
this meeting, but
you got a sec?
Yeah, I got a sec.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to be rude or anything, but those items in the agenda there, they're very detailed and descriptive in nature, just the way they're included there.
Yeah.
So, just asking if anyone has any questions or updates on it might save us a few minutes to work on the stuff that we've got here. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for the recommendation.
Here, amazing color. They are. It's beautiful. Colorist. She's a colorist, right? Isn't that like something?
Sat, just so you know, you're not muted right now.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad I didn't say anything really bad.
Commissioner Wilson wanted you to say hello to the orcas.
I would love, last year when we were up there, we saw easily 25 whales. We had a whole pod coming. This year, I haven't been so lucky. But it's a beautiful place anyway.
So that you realize that's under unincorporated San Juan County. And we used to have some staff here who had worked for them.
Oh, really? Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I try to tell them how cool our county is and try to shape them up. So
It would be a neat county that the whole county is over a series of islands.
you can imagine
Oh,
the confusion that, according to my sister and family, it takes years to get a permit here. Same problem we have, nobody can afford to live here,
yeah.
except the very wealthy. And they can't go to Winslow, get off the island. You have to take a ferry.
All right, Mr. McNeely, this is Chair Ontiveros. It is 5:30 now, so I am going to call this evening's meeting to order. I'm going to start by reading the meeting rules and procedures. So welcome to the June 28th, 2023 meeting of the Coconino County Planning and Zoning Commission. Cases will be heard in the order they appear on the agenda. Following the staff presentation, the applicant and/or the applicant's representative may address the commission. As an applicant, if you agree with the staff report and have no additional information, please feel free to keep your comments brief. Any relevant comments are welcome. Following the applicant's presentation, I will make a call to the public. If you wish to address this case, please state your name and address. We ask that your comments be limited to 3 minutes or less. Comments must be relevant to the case. Please address all comments to the commission. No matter how strongly you may feel about the case, all comments must be polite and courteous. After all interested public have spoken, the public comment portion will be closed. Discussion will then take place amongst commissioners. Decisions of this commission regarding any zone change or preliminary subdivision plat approval are referred to the Board of Supervisors as a recommendation. All other case decisions are binding unless appealed to the Board of Supervisors. If you disagree with the commission's decision, you have 15 days to appeal. Please contact staff at the Community Development Office for appeal procedures. Due to the virtual nature of this meeting, I will be doing a roll call vote of the commissioners to ensure accuracy for the record. Please mute your speakers and turn off your camera. Also, please do not use the comment function for discussions. It is for communicating with staff if you are having a technical problem. With that, thank you for joining us this evening and actively participating in our county planning. The first item on the agenda this evening is the Pledge of Allegiance. If everyone would please stand, and Mr. McNeely, please lead us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If anyone would like to join me, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. The second item on the agenda this evening is the election of chair and vice chair. I'm going to open it up for the other commissioners to speak at this time. Commissioner Ruggles, you're unmuted.
Thank you very much. I'm going to cut to the chase right off the bat here and make a motion to re-elect Commissioner Ontiveros and Vice Commissioner Burton to the positions of Chair and Vice Chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission.
I'll second that.
Okay, I've got a motion by Commissioner Ruggles and a second by Commissioner Williams to re-elect Chair Ontiveros, to the chair and Vice Chair Burton to the vice chair position for the following year. All in favor, please say aye. Commissioner Best,
Aye.
Commissioner Burton,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson,
Aye.
Commissioner Walsh, Commissioner Walsh, I think you're muted. Let's see, is Commissioner Walsh with us?
Madam Chair, I believe Commissioner Walsh had to drop off the meeting. However, we still do have a quorum.
Okay, so she won't be then at the meeting this evening.
We don't anticipate that she will rejoin, no.
Got it. Okay, so let me knock that off. Okay, Commissioner Ruggles,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
and this is Chair Aunt Taveras. And I would just like to tell my fellow commissioners, thank you again for your vote of confidence in me, and I hope to serve you well for the following year. So with that, the next item is the approval of the May 31st, 2023 minutes. If there's no changes or modifications, I'll accept a motion in a second, please.
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I will second that motion.
Okay, I've got a motion by Commissioner Wilson and a second by Commissioner Ruggles to approve the May 31st, 2023 minutes. All in favor, please say aye. Commissioner Best,
Aye.
Commissioner Burton,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson,
Aye.
Commissioner Ruggles,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
and this is Chair Aunt Taveras. I also vote aye. The motion passes unanimously. The first item on our public hearing agenda is case number CUP 23-007.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Jess McNeely with Community Development staff. This is a conditional use permit request for a cell tower in the Kaibab Estates area. Bob Short of our staff is managing this case. I see he already has his screen shared. So Bob, please go ahead and give your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. McNeely. Thank you, Madam Chair. Can everyone hear me and see my screen?
Yep, we can see you and hear you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This case is the Vertical Bridge Cell Tower at CUP 23-007. In this case, the application, the property owner is the Republic Properties, Inc. of Scottsdale, Arizona. Applicant is Vertical Bridge of Boca Raton, Florida. The representative is Sean Sanchez of State 48 Development Consulting of Scottsdale. Zoning CG 10,000. The size of the parcel or the development is a 0.23 acre portion of a 6.58 acre parcel. And the request is a conditional use permit for a 120-foot wireless telecommunications facility. This is a vicinity map showing the subject property. As you can see, this is Ash Fork, which is outside the county, outside Coconino County. You take double A Ranch Road up to this parcel in the commercial zone. And this is an aerial photo showing the subject property. You can see the location of the tower, roughly right in the middle of this circle. And as you can see, these are the red properties are commercially zoned. And the other properties in this area, the yellowish properties are AR zoned. And you can see this large cinder pit right here in the middle covering this parcel and the subject property as well. Okay, first I want to talk about some special considerations for a cell tower application. Cell towers are a little bit different. They have a little bit more things to consider. The first thing is that the determination of impacts from radio frequency radiation is entirely within the purview of the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC. That cannot be considered by the commission. That would include any kind of emissions from the cell tower, any kind of health effects from the cell tower emissions. Also, in addition to the findings of fact for a conditional use permit, there are 2 additional considerations for the commission to consider. And this is based on federal statutes in the Telecommunications Act of 1996. So I put this here so that you can consider this as the presentation goes along. The first one is, has the applicant demonstrated there is a significant gap in coverage? And second, is the proposed tower the least intrusive means of addressing the coverage gap? And I'll talk about this more later as we move along. I wanted to kind of show a definition of each of those. A significant gap in coverage means that a provider is prevented from covering a significant gap in their own coverage. So if there's a cell tower provider, in this case, the original one would be T-Mobile. Are they prevented from addressing that gap in coverage? And least intrusive means it requires the provider show that the manner in which it proposes to fill the significant gap in services is the least intrusive means. In other words, does the site and the design of the tower provide the least impact? And that's based on our zoning ordinance, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But primarily we're looking at the design and the location. Are those both appropriate? Is that the least intrusive means of addressing the coverage gap? Okay, with that, I'll move on to the facility. This tower would provide for co-location and may include multiple antennas in the future, including a microwave antenna. Right now, it only has one. It would only have one antenna initially on the tower. The facility would be enclosed in a 50 by 50 enclosure, and that'd be surrounded by an 8-foot chain link fence. And that fence would be required to have colored slats to match the surrounding environment. So however the surrounding environment looks, that would be the color that would be expected. That's a condition in the staff report. The tower does not meet the 105-foot height setback, but it would collapse within a 75-foot radius per a certified engineer. So our zoning ordinance says that the tower has to be 105% of its height away from the nearest property line. In this case, it's only 87.5 feet, which is not 105% of a 120-foot tower. However, if the applicant can provide this letter from a certified engineer, which they have, then that can be waived. So the engineer, basically the certified engineer, is saying that the tower would break and collapse within a 75-foot radius, so it would not go across the property line.
Okay, Mr. Short, this is Chair Ontiveros, and let me just quickly, there is kind of an echo.
I hear that.
Yeah, Mr. McNeely, could you mute and let's see if that's what it is. I'm going to mute and go ahead now, Mr. Short, and let's see if that clears it.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, there would be no lights installed at the top of the tower because it is less than 200 feet tall, and those are not required by the FAA. Other lights at the bottom would have to meet zone ordinance requirements, and that means they need to be fully shielded and be motion sensitive lighting. And this is the proposed tower color. This is a site plan showing the tower on the site. This is the site right here. This is Buck Drive, and you can see the 50 by 50 foot enclosure where the chain link fence would be. The tower would be right in the middle of that. It's about 87, I believe it's exactly 87.5 feet from the property line here on AA Ranch Road. And to measure to the actual roadway, I believe it's about 130 feet. And this is an elevation of the tower. So if you look at the top picture, the top of the tower, this is what would initially be installed on the tower. That's the T-Mobile equipment. There would also be a microwave. I didn't see a microwave called out on here. But as they go along, the applicant would want others like Verizon, AT&T, and those could all increase the number of antennas on the tower as shown. This is a coverage map showing the current coverage in this area. And as you can see, each of these little red marks, that's a tower. That's a cell tower. And you can see they're along. This is in Ash Fork. This is down I-40 a little ways. Notice that the green area, that's the best coverage. That's what you call over here on this chart, that's commercial coverage. The green area, which doesn't quite match that, I would say, but that would entail a residential level of coverage. The yellow area would entail like the coverage you could get from being in a car. And then these last two here, it looks like, well, at least this last one here is outdoor coverage. So I do have to say the colors don't always match up perfectly, but you can see that this would be further out in this area. So this would be the location of the tower on AA Ranch Road. And this is the current coverage level. And this is the extended coverage level created by the tower so that there would be better coverage in this area. And I wanted to give you an idea of what that means exactly. So if you look at it from this perspective, now the interesting thing, I'll go back one, is that I don't really see anything except the green expand on here. So that's all that the applicant is showing at this point, is just an expansion of the screen, which is the commercial level. So if you look at that commercial level again, the green, it would go out about 2 miles, a little spotty. It looks like it goes across a canyon right here. So it'd go about 2 miles to the west and north, about 1 mile to the south. And it's very important that it would cover, this is the KEW Volunteer Fire Department. So it's very important that it covers that fire department to provide emergency services and 911 service. These are some photo sims the applicant has provided showing the tower from a variety of locations throughout the community. This is from Verde Drive. It's about 1,450 feet from the tower. You can see it's not very visible. This is on the west side. This is also on the west side. It's at 1,400 feet. You can see it back in here. The vegetation is kind of covering up, so it's not very visible again. This is from Mesa Drive, which is on the east side. It's quite a bit closer. It's at 1,030 feet. You can't see it over here. You can see the tower over there. This is from Fountain Drive, also on the east side of the tower, and you can see it. It's a little bit more visible right there. And this is from Charm Drive, fairly close to the tower at 750 feet. And this is coming from the north, traveling south on AA Ranch Road. If you can see right here, that's Buck Road right there, right by the tower. So the tower would be right in here. This is at 300 feet. And this last one is from right on site. So it's like 30 feet from the tower. You can see the antennas on top, the initial antennas that would be on top right there. Okay, I want to talk about conformance of the zoning ordinance. As the commission knows, after reading the staff report, the zoning ordinance does have what we call preferred facilities and disfavored facilities. So in this case, on the preferred facilities list, the tower is ranked 4th. That's because it's a new site on previously disturbed areas such as a cinder pit. This is literally on a cinder pit or near a cinder pit. It also ranks 6th as a new tower, 100 to 175 feet in the commercial zone. Now note that 1 is the most preferred and 10 is the least preferred. So surrounding the commercial property in this area is AR zone properties, and they would rank 9 out of 10. So it's a very low ranking to get off of the commercial zone property onto any of the AR around there. This tower is also considered a disfavored facility. That's C, because it's very close and actually kind of adjacent to residential areas. It's right across the road from residential areas. And this is just kind of for your information. This is the list of preferred facilities. Number 1 being co-location on existing towers, so you don't have to build any more towers. Then there's the concealed or camouflaged facilities. And then down here at the bottom, there's a new tower. And these are disfavored facilities. Some of them were located within, scenic corridors, such things. This one is a C because it's adjacent to or very close to residential areas. Now, these are the factors leading to the selection of the site. First of all, it meets the applicant's coverage objective. That's T-Mobile. This is an area that doesn't have very good cell coverage from at least some carriers. So it meets their coverage objective. The site is close to Double A Ranch Road. This is the most important thoroughfare in the area. So as you know, when you're traveling down a road, you like to have cell coverage. It's located in a commercial zone on a disturbed site. As I said before, it's a cinder pit. Other commercial properties, if available, would be equally impactful to residential areas. And I'll show you a map in a minute and show you how that would kind of play out in this area. The surrounding AR zone ranks lower on the preferred facilities list. As I mentioned, it ranks 9th. Other areas on the property would interfere with the owner's business operation. They have a cinder pit on this property and it needed to be in a place that wouldn't interfere with that. That cinder pit may expand in the future. It provides coverage for the 911 emergency services. That's KW Volunteer Fire Department, located about 0.4 miles from the site. And this area does not contain tall pine ponderosa pine trees and was not considered appropriate for a monopine. So as the commissioners who have been here for a while know, almost all of the towers that the county does are monopines. They're fake pine trees that would stick out here quite a bit since there are none around. Okay, so this is the zoning and development near the proposed tower. You can see again the proposed location of the facility right there. Now note that if you're looking for commercial property to locate on in this area, then this is very disturbed, so there's not much place here for it. It's an active cinder pit as far as I know. So it'd be nice to put it up in here, but that's in the bottom of the cinder pit where the owner is operating his business. If you located it here, you're close to residential. If you located on one of these, that's assuming they were available for sale or for lease. That is also closer to residential. This already has residential on it, I believe. It's also close to residential. If you move it back in here, it's also close to residential. So this is kind of one of the only places that we can see where you could develop the tower in this area. In terms of citizen participation, the applicant notified 74 property owners within a quarter mile of the subject property and invited them to a meeting on December 21st of last year. 9 people attended the meeting and provided comments. Concerns included visual impacts of the tower, health concerns, effects on property values, emergency generator noise, and several other concerns described in the citizen participation report. So that's included in your packet. So you can look at what, what has been said, what citizens had commented on. The applicant and staff has received additional comments. Those are also in your packet. One comment did support the proposal, and we did get another comment yesterday. Actually, you got it today. And this is the 1/4 mile owner notification area. The red line is a 1/4 mile, 1,320 feet from the subject property. And as you can see, all of these green outline properties were notified of this application. These are the findings of fact for a conditional use permit. I've addressed those in the staff report, and also here. Number 1 is that the proposed location of the conditional use is in accord with the objectives of the ordinance, the zoning ordinance, and the purpose of the zone in which the site is located. As I've said before, a cell tower or wireless telecommunications facility is allowed in the CG 10,000 zone with approval of a conditional use permit. Number 2, that the proposed location of the conditional use and the conditions under which it would be operated or maintained will not be detrimental to the public health, safety, or welfare, or materially injurious to properties or improvements in the vicinity. The response to that is that it ranks 4 and 6 out of 10 as a preferred ranking, a preferred location, and that it is actually a disfavored facility because it's very close to a residential area. Finding number 3, that the proposed conditional use will comply with each of the applicable provisions of this ordinance except for approved variances. The project does comply with the ordinance, and if you looked at the ordinance, the wireless telecommunications section of the ordinance has 3.9, section 3.9. It does cover a lot of the aspects of cell towers without requiring waivers. And finding number 4, that the proposed conditional use is consistent with and conforms to the goals and objectives and policies of the general plan or specific plan for the area. There is no area plan here, so these are the applicable comprehensive plan policies. First, the first one encourages enhanced wireless infrastructure that supports public safety purposes. Obviously, it's real close to a fire station, so it provides that service, emergency service. The second one, utilities infrastructure shall be located in a manner sensitive to the community character and environmental and scenic resources. So that one may conflict in this case because it is real close, very close to a residential area. And as I said before, in addition to the findings for a conditional use permit, there are also findings based on federal statutes. So basically what federal statutes would say is if the commission determines the application does meet the findings and believes the application should be denied, there are additional issues to consider based on the federal statute. So that this is just in case, obviously, if the commission can make the findings and approves the tower, this would not apply. But if the commission cannot make the findings and decides to deny the tower, these are additional considerations. The first is the application may be denied if the applicant does not demonstrate there is a significant gap in coverage. So if the commission does not think that's been demonstrated, it can be denied. However, if the applicant has demonstrated there is a significant gap in coverage, the application may only be denied if the commission determines the proposal is not the least intrusive means of addressing the significant gap in coverage. Is the location and the design of the tower Is that not the least intrusive means of addressing the gap in coverage? And if the commission decides this is correct, then that we would need something specific in the record to address why they think this is not the right location or the right design. And this is a cell tower application evaluation chart that was in your packet. I'm not going to go back over this again, but we can discuss it somewhat if the commission would like. And with that, if the commission can make the findings for a conditional use permit and can meet federal requirements, staff recommends approval with the conditions in the staff report. And with that, I'll take any questions from the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Short. This is Chair Taveras. Commissioner Ruggles, I saw your hand first. Please go ahead. Then I
Okay.
saw Commissioner Best, and then Commissioner Wilson. You will follow Commissioner Best. So please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I would like to know if there was anything in the ordinance specific to communications facilities such as this about the sound level at the property line. I was rather remiss in not checking that prior to the meeting tonight. So if Mr. Short could tell me, I would certainly appreciate it. My memory says we didn't put that in the that part of the ordinance, but if I'm wrong, I'd sure like to know it.
Commissioner Ruggles, I was kind of thinking the exact same thing when we went by that a minute ago. So it is possible. I do not remember that being in the ordinance, and there may not be a condition as well. So we can certainly add that.
Okay, thank you.
So Commissioner Ruggles and Bob, Madam Chair, yeah, I'm scanning through the ordinance now. The ordinance, that is something that got added into the ordinance
did?
for other sections, but this section of the ordinance
Okay.
does not address a noise control or limit.
Thank you, Mr. McNeely. Will Commissioner Ruggles, we can add that condition.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Commissioner Best, go ahead.
Thank you. The last time we had a case where we had a tower adjacent to private property like this, residential property, we went through quite a process. This was in Oak Creek Canyons, the last one I remember, maybe 7 years ago, 6, 7 years ago. We went through quite a process of examining where else a possible tower could be located. And I know that Mr. Short looked at a few of the residential properties or commercial properties just in this immediate location. But my question would be, are there other potential locations that would give more or less the same coverage? Obviously, the coverage of this is going to go a lot farther than just the immediate vicinity that we're talking about here. Is there high ground somewhere else that would be less in the middle of a neighborhood? So I wonder if any analysis has been done along those lines.
Well, Commissioner Best, I think the point in this case is this is a pretty specific location where the applicant is looking to create additional coverage. So this is their location. I mean, you could go, there are many other commercial areas throughout Kaibab Estates West. They chose this location because, well, first of all, it's close to the fire station, so they get the emergency coverage. It's, as you can see on this map, it's a commercial area. It's right on AA Ranch Road, which is the thoroughfare going through this area. So, you know, if you pull up Kaibab Estates West, there are many other commercial zones you could put it in. Obviously, if you put it in one of the residential zones, that's not a preferred site. That's number 9 on the list. So I think based on the coverage that the applicant was looking for, this was the location. There wasn't really anything else. I mean, you can always raise the height of the tower. You can do many things to get better coverage. But this was the location they were looking for.
Okay, thank you very much.
Commissioner Wilson? Commissioner Wilson, before you begin, I'm going to keep the meeting in order here, and I see a hand raised from an individual that says iPhone. I don't recognize that as being a staff or a commission member, so I'm going to ask that that hand be lowered, because this time of questioning is strictly for commissioners to ask questions of staff. Thank you. Go ahead, Commissioner Wilson.
Thank you. Mr. Short, you talk about 9/11 coverage for the fire station. I'm not clear. I'm sure they don't dispatch from that volunteer fire department. What are you referring to when you say 9/11 coverage for the fire station?
Well, actually, I'm speaking of emergency calls, which would be able to get to the fire station easier if you have better cell coverage here. So I'm not sure exactly what you mean. It depends on the kind of emergency, I guess, you're speaking of. So
it's not really related to the fire station itself. It's improved cell coverage will produce
right.
Better 9/11 coverage.
Yes, and they would also have better coverage at the station itself. They would be able to get calls in easier themselves if there's more coverage here. We had the same issue with Oak Creek, with the cell tower application down there where they did.
I'm just trying to understand. Yeah, I'm just trying to understand why the fire station needs better cell service. It's a volunteer fire service. It's not manned all the time, and the dispatch isn't done by them anyway. So I wasn't clear on how that was a factor here. All right. Echoing Commissioner Ruggles' comments about the generator noise, looking at the cut sheet for the generator that's being proposed, there are different levels of acoustic enclosures for that generator. And so I would suggest that the requirement for the noise restrictions include referencing that so that the appropriate level acoustic enclosure is used to ensure that kind of whatever we decide the number is, dB at the property line. And then you mentioned that there are, right now, it's a particular carrier's coverage, and so there'll be cell antennas, which are usually long or tall, narrow, vertical arrays of an antenna, but that microwave antennas may also be mounted on this. And my experience is microwave antennas are not nearly as unobtrusive. They're large, round, usually painted white kinds of antennas. Is that the case here?
Commissioner Wilson, I haven't seen the actual microwave antenna or the size of it.
We can wait until the applicant maybe could address that, because I think that plays a role here in what we're looking at aesthetically and impacts on the neighborhood. So, all right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Wilson.
Commissioner Ruggles, I see your hand raised again.
Yes, I was going to add to Commissioner Wilson's comment about the generator and the noise. I was going to speak to that and provide some numbers that tell you what that could look like during the commission discussion. And I would just soon leave it until then.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Ruggles. This is Chair Ontiveros. Mr. Short, could you go back to the propagation map, the current one? Okay, was there, you know what, you had a different one that showed where the fire station was? That you pointed out. Can you pull up that slide? Okay. So right now, currently, it is already in a green service area. Am I correct with that?
Not within the commercial not this green service area. If you look, I'll go back to previous ones. You go back to the actual current, notice there is no green commercial service area around this area. It would be located about right here. So no, it is not currently in that area.
Okay, and was I also, go to the slide that you just had it on, please.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Go back to, there you go. In your presentation, did you say that the red dot showed current cell tower locations?
Yes, these are cell towers.
Okay, so then am I correct that there is already a cell tower there?
No, I'm sorry. These are current cell towers. This one is the proposed one.
The proposed, okay,
Right,
so
I
there is not
apologize, yeah.
one there right now. So
Right.
the next question may be more for the applicant, because looking at the legend, there is the commercial and the residential, the two shades of green. Do you know what the difference is in the service between the commercial and residential?
I don't know except for these numbers down here, which I am not super clear about. That is something the applicant is prepared to make a presentation so they can answer those questions.
Okay, then why don't we do that? I'm not seeing any other hands raised from the commissioners at this time. So I'm going to ask if the applicant or the applicant's representative would like to address the commission this evening, please. And please state your name and address for the record and then go ahead and address.
Hi, Tammy. This is Shannon McCrae, a project manager with State 48 Development Consulting. Our address is 14301 North 87th Street, Suite 105 in Scottsdale, Arizona, 85260. I just wanted to say quickly, thank you, Bob, for that detailed presentation. And thank you for going over all of the components of the site. I really appreciate that. There were a couple of items that I wanted to touch on in regards to the coverage map. We can have an RF engineer provide more of a detailed breakdown of the difference between the residential and the commercial coverage as shown on this coverage map. So I'd be happy to get that detailed information from the RF engineer, as these reports were provided by T-Mobile's radio frequency engineer. As shown in this current coverage map that Bob has up currently, there is a lack in coverage in the sense that the yellow portion that's shown there is service that's only accessible in a car versus residential and commercial. So this is something that T-Mobile and Vertical Bridge were hoping to address with this new tower here. There were a couple of other items as well that I wanted to touch on. I know that light was mentioned as one of the potential concerns. There will be 4 tech lights installed on the equipment pad for the initial carrier T-Mobile, but those will be shielded and they will be motion censored. So those will not be on at any given time, and we can make sure that those are up to all of the information in the code. Another item that was mentioned as well, I know of concern, was the microwave. We do have final CDs that show the microwave antenna. It's a small antenna. So I'm happy to share the drawings to show you what that would look like. And we can also create photo sims to include with our BP submittal or to send over to the commission as well, if that would be preferred. This request came at a later date after we had submitted our original zoning drawing application. So we can get that ordered as well. As mentioned, as Bob mentioned, this area was selected as there is a gap in coverage here that was identified by FCC broadband standards and Vertical Bridges, as well as T-Mobile tool here, is to address the coverage gap that you're seeing on this current coverage map right now. We did determine that a monopole would best suit this area, as there are overhead power lines here. And as Bob mentioned, there really aren't many tall trees in the area. So we felt that a monopine would stick out rather than blend in. Something that we had discussed with Bob on the side was doing the tower that gray color to try to blend in with the surrounding area and minimize the impact to the surrounding community as much as possible. Trying to think of if there were any other questions that needed to be addressed here. I know obviously with that zoning map as well, it showed that those surrounding parcels are zoned AR. As Bob mentioned, those areas are not preferred for a new cell tower, which is why we opted to go with this, this property here that's zoned commercial. I'd be happy to share the drawings or a presentation that we have prepared. However, I do think that Bob did a very good job at showing all of the components of the site, as well as a detailed presentation of the different components going on here.
I'm sorry, this is Chair Antiveros. Ms. McCrea, I neglected to unmute. Does that conclude your presentation to the commission at this time?
I would be happy to share if that's okay with you. I can go ahead and share the aerial view of the site on the CDs, and as well as the elevation of kind of what the size of that microwave antenna would look like. As noted, I don't currently have photo sims showing exactly what that will be as it will appear on the tower, but we are happy to get those if that is something that you guys would like to see. But if it's okay with you, I can go ahead and share my screen to show that.
Yes, if you would like to present, go ahead, please.
Okay, perfect. Okay, are you able to see my screen here?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so something that Bob mentioned is that T-Mobile's antennas will be installed at this initial rad. They'll be installed just right here. We do have the goal with this new facility to allow for multiple carriers. As shown on that coverage map, there are other cell towers in the area, but with these cell towers of this height, it allows for co-location abilities for multiple wireless carriers. So this will reduce additional towers needed for the area here. This microwave antenna is proximity of size to the antennas that will be installed on the physical tower itself. And again, we're happy to get photo sims of what that might look like over to the commission for supplementary review if that is something that would be preferred. I did actually also just remember another comment that was made regarding sound. There will be eventually an emergency backup generator that will be installed at this site. Something that individual carriers typically do in the event that there's a power outage. They can rely on this emergency backup generator to provide power to the site. This will only cycle once per week for a total of 15 minutes, and we can make sure that it meets any sound requirements as required by the jurisdiction or the code. So we're happy to accommodate that as well. And I think there may have also been an additional comment on our photo sims. The chain link fence compound did not show the privacy slats, so that is something that we have discussed, and we will make sure that that is also plotted for privacy as shown on these drawings here, and we'll make sure that the color matches whatever is preferred by the jurisdiction to blend in with the surrounding environment.
Okay, thank you, Ms. McCrea. Does that conclude your presentation at this time?
Yes, ma'am. At this time, I believe that Bob did a great job of explaining all of the other components, but I'm happy to answer any additional questions that anyone might have.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Wilson, I see your hand raised, so why don't you go ahead?
Thank you. I have a question for you, Ms. McRae. I'm looking at the T-Mobile coverage map on their website, and it shows that the area that in question that we're looking at here is all 5G coverage. That's on their map right now. So I'm questioning the gap that's shown in the RF engineers drawings don't seem to coincide with what T-Mobile is advertising on their website as far as coverage in this area. Can you address why there's a difference?
So I would have to look at the page that you're currently viewing. The system that T-Mobile uses to create these propagation maps is an internal system, and they also determine what we call search rings, which is where they identify there's a need for improved coverage in that area. So I would have to see specifically what you're looking into, and I'm happy to follow up on that. But this comes directly from the radio frequency engineer for this specific area, noting that there is a gap in coverage. So I would be happy to follow up with the radio frequency engineer at T-Mobile to get some further explanation on that. But at this time, that was the current coverage that is shown in the area, as well as the improvement with this new tower.
Okay, just for your reference, it's T-Mobile.com /coverage-map.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Wilson. Ms. McCrea, this is Chair Ontiveros, and I'm going to ask Mr. Short to put up the slides of the current coverage and the before and after, the slides that you have, Mr. Short.
I do have those up as well, but if Bob, if you have them up currently, either way, I can share them as well.
Oh yeah, either, I don't care, either could pull it up.
Oh, sorry.
You're good. Thank you, Bob.
I will now.
Thank you, Bob.
No,
Appreciate it.
not that one. The
Okay.
one that actually has before and after. I think
Okay.
it's 47 and 48 maybe.
Okay, this is the before current.
But it's
coverage.
actually labeled before.
Oh, okay. You want this is actually the same map. I just labeled a little different, but this is the same map.
Okay. You know what? Hold on a second. Let me. I don't know why my screen will not toggle. Okay, Bob. Specifically, will you pull up page from your staff report 47, page 47 and 48, please?
Okay. Let me get off of here and pull that up. Here we go.
Okay, there we go. There we go. That's what I'm looking
It's
for.
before first.
Okay, so we have the before, and we see where the proposed tower is going to go. And in that area, it is pretty much surrounded by the residential green. Okay, so now go down and pull up the after. Okay, and so it appears to me that it leaves it very much the same. It just makes it a darker green. I wish we could see them like both on the same. Is there any way to see them at the same time, the before and after at the same time?
I don't think it would be easy to do that. I could try,
Okay.
see if I can pull up, I can pull up the slideshow. That would be too different. I don't think I can do that, actually.
Okay, and that's okay because I can pull it up. I actually have it on my computer. And so I'm looking at them. I see the before and I see the after. I can kind of fit them both on, like, and look at them kind of at the same time. And I do see that the proposed tower would add some more residential green, and it would add some commercial green, according to the legend. So my question to Ms. McCrea is, define significant gap in coverage for me.
Yeah, of course. So the way that they identify significant gap in coverage is based on the colors of the map there. So obviously this is showing what the coverage after will look like here with the increased green area showing where the tower will be placed versus on the initial coverage map, it just has that yellow color initially identified, showing that there are gaps in coverage. There's unfilled bins driving through this neighborhood where you'll lose service and you won't necessarily have the capability to contact emergency services, something that is really important to Vertical Bridge as well as T-Mobile and any other carriers that might co-locate, that everyone in these areas where they're looking to place new towers has access to those emergency services, as well as has, fast, reliable service as well. But they look at these areas where there is a significant gap in terms of unfilled bins and areas that, are showing that there's a lack of coverage, and they try to address that by placing a new tower.
Okay, Ms. McCrea, would it be possible for you to pull up a side-by-side, a before and after side-by-side, so this commission can see that? Because I understand what you just said. I do understand what you just said, but I'm wondering, I think that maybe I'm wondering what significant is. Because as I look at this, I see that there's already coverage there. So I see that there's not even really a gap. This is my opinion, but I see that there's not even really a gap there right now, because it does have the residential green. I will agree that it is turning to a darker green, which is the residential to the commercial. And I still don't understand the difference between those two coverages.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I would be happy to share that. Let me go ahead and share my screen quickly.
And Madam Chair, perhaps Ms. McCrea could explain the difference in the commercial and the residential coverage. What is, in kind of layman's terms, what does that mean? We can see the numbers on here, but I think a lot of us don't know what that means exactly.
Yes, exactly. We can see shades, we can see numbers, but you got to break it down for us. What does that really mean? And another question that I have is, does the KEW Fire Department, volunteer fire department, have coverage now?
So in this area, there is coverage where the fire department is located. However, it's spotty coverage there. So with this yellow kind of area, and I tried to crop it and zoom in as much as possible, just in the period of time here. I have the two side by side. So this shows the current coverage here. This shows what the coverage will look like after the fact. So this area right here is showing, and it's a little bit hard to see, obviously, because it is zoomed out here, but with these yellow areas, these are potential areas where there could be loss of coverage. Driving, you could lose signal here. There is residential coverage. However, within the residential coverage areas, there are yellow items as well, which would mean that there's spotty service. Commercial, obviously this area is primarily residential. The couple of parcels that are where the tower is going to be placed are commercial. And that is, part of how we determined that this parcel would be preferred for the new wireless facility. However, commercial service, so to speak, is typically stronger. The signal strength is stronger when it comes to commercial, the commercial service identified in these areas versus the residential. And this area here in green obviously increases the residential coverage as well as the coverage for commercial. And part of that is that the darker green color, the improved coverage is needed in especially commercial areas where there's more residents, where there's a lack of coverage and they need that stronger service there, versus residential, when it's spanned out a little bit. It's not necessarily the level of coverage is not necessarily as important, but due to these areas in yellow here that are showing that there are gaps, that creates concerns for carriers and the capability for surrounding residents to have access to be able to contact emergency services and to have fast, reliable service as well.
Okay, so going to the point you made about bringing commercial coverage into a commercial area, it's a cinder pit. I'm just trying to be real here. It's a cinder pit. So this area is really largely residential. Because I'm looking at the before, I'm looking at even the after, and I'm still seeing yellow. I'm still seeing spotty yellow. Like if you look at both of them side by side and you look at where the proposed tower is going to be, and you start moving to the left in a westerly direction, they're still yellow. There's still much of that yellow, at least if I'm seeing this correctly, is still there. And I guess here's the question. Significant means what again? Like I hate to keep drilling down on this, but I guess I was thinking that maybe there would be a bigger bang for the buck here with this tower. But it looks like it's just turning it darker green on the after, and it is expanding some green, but I'm still seeing quite a bit of yellow still in here.
Yeah, so I can kind of speak to that as well. So just to, I guess, give an example with another site that we have as well. What RF looks at when they determine, need for a new cell tower in these areas is they look at items where they have customers whose needs are not being met. They have customers who don't have access to E911 services. And in this area, it was identified by FCC broadband standards that there are gaps in coverage here in these yellow areas identified on this RF propagation map here. And so what the coverage objective is and the way that the antennas are positioned, so to speak, as you can see here, they're shooting what they call different rads, different azimuths. So the antennas are facing this way, and this way, which is kind of why this one has like a little bit more of an impact here versus in this area. Their objective was to increase and improve coverage to this direction mostly, which is why this area is still being shown in yellow versus this area here, which had the coverage and demand that they were looking to address.
Okay, but would you agree with me that there are still yellow areas like even right out of that dark green on the after picture right there. Would you agree that there are still yellow areas there?
Yes, that's correct. There are yellow areas. Are you referring to this area here? Yeah,
And even
these
down,
areas.
there's some spotty down.
Madam Chair,
Yeah,
Okay, and so again, just to conclude kind of my question, the fire department, the volunteer fire department currently does have coverage.
I can't speak to the specific coverage in that area, as I haven't gone out there, but it appears they have some coverage, but it's not a strong signal there.
Okay, so the difference again between residential and commercial is a stronger signal.
Stronger signal strength, correct.
Okay. All right, I'm going to leave my questions there. Commissioner Wilson, before I open it to you, I'm going to ask Adam O to please put your hand down. This is a time for commissioners to ask questions of the applicant. The public is not involved in this portion just yet. Thank you. And Commissioner Wilson, go ahead.
thank you. I'm wondering, Ms. McCray, the antenna array that's depicted in the drawings that you're showing here completely eliminates any going north, and the area to the northeast directly from that tower is the least served in this entire surrounding area. The areas that Chair Tavares was mentioning over to the west, when you look at it in Google Earth, you can see topographically are canyons, and so those are areas that cell tower height probably can't reach. But the area directly to the north is not. And so I would wonder, it would seem the least served area is the one being left off of the easiest place to get to from this monopole. There is no array going towards the north. Can you help me understand why, since that would be a significant increase in coverage from yellow to green or dark green?
Yeah, so, RF has certain objectives. This area here was the objective that they were looking to address this coverage gap and this spotty service here. We can definitely follow up with them regarding, this area here, and if there's a potential to increase the coverage capacity this direction. The objective that they advised to us was that this area here is the area that they're looking primarily to address that. But I'd be happy to bring that up to them and mention that, it looks like this area is underserved as well, and potentially does require additional coverage to the north.
I can tell you that making a finding might be easier if that were the case. Second question is really, you mentioned E911, the enhanced 911 service.
Correct.
Can you tell me whether these different colors of coverage on the map reflect whether E911 is or is not available within that coverage area?
I can't specifically speak to that. So kind of what the colors are covering
Well, they're
is
single strengths, I understand that, but
correct.
E911 is important because it's geolocating and reporting your specific location in addition to some other information. Does this change or enhance the E911 capabilities as a result of this tower?
Yes, this would enhance E911 services.
Where?
It would enhance E911 services to all surrounding residents as well as to the fire department that's located approximately here. And it would allow for calls to be made out to other E911 services in the area, such as fire, police, etc. So, specifically this volunteer fire department here would improve their coverage, but it would also improve the coverage for residents to be able to make those calls.
Okay, but it doesn't expand the E911 coverage. E911 is either is or is not, regardless of this tower. Is that correct?
it will expand the E911 coverage for specifically for that volunteer fire department that's located here. But it would be, in what capacity they have coverage in this moment, that's not something that I can currently speak to.
I guess I'm probably phrasing this poorly, and I apologize. Are there areas shown on this map right now that do not have E911 coverage?
So these areas in yellow are the areas where there's body service. It's not necessarily I can't say 100% that they don't have E911 services, but the signal strength is very weak in this area, and these areas that are identified as yellow, which is creating this need for the improved signal strength for them to have the capability to call. But I can't, this map does not indicate how much coverage is existing in terms of being able to get in contact with them, other than identifying the signal strength there.
Thank you.
All right, do any of the other commissioners have questions for Ms. McCrea at this time? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to open it up to the public at this point. Mr. McNeely, I will ask that you time each speaker 3 minutes, and that you give a 1 minute warning so that they know they've got 1 minute to complete the comments. And with that, I'm going to remind the public that as I call on you, if you would like to address the commission, please raise your hand or unmute. I will call on you. I ask that you state your name and address for the record, and then you will have 3 minutes to address the commission this evening. So with that, would anyone like to address the commission this evening on this case? Okay, I see Adam O. Adam, if you would like to state your name and address for the record, and then your 3 minutes will begin. Go ahead.
Yes, my name is Adam Oligschlager. I'm at 4272 North Double Ranch Road, which is essentially within 400 feet of that tower. But I just wrote something up. I'd like to say it to the committee real quick, and then I'll be done. Hello, I'm a registered contractor, and having installed one of these in the past, I'm against the placement of this cell tower near my property. Based on the plans I've seen here, the structure will be less than 400 feet from 2 homesteads, one building occupied and the other underway. As I'm sure we all know, cell towers act as lightning rods, not to mention increased noise and light pollution, potential neither of which I want near my property. The entrance for the site is also at a bad bend in the road, which will lead to increased traffic and accident potential during and after the construction for all the homesteads and visitors to the National Forest. I hope this committee will find that the tower needs to be relocated further back on the 6 acres from the road, or better yet, a different location entirely. I'm really excited to now be part of this community. Thank you for your time. Oh, and my earlier email could be ignored. I'd sent one in and I kind of just covered it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Adam. Would anyone else like to address the commission this evening? Okay, Deborah Guthrie, please state your name and address, and then your 3 minutes will begin.
Hello, my name is Deborah Guthrie. I'm at 4176 North Double A Ranch Road. And I recall that it was mentioned that other locations were not looked at, and I'm wondering why some other locations have not been looked at, particularly on the ridges or up higher where more service can be brought to the community. And again, I am also against this location. It's in rock throwing distance from my property. So that would be my question. And if other locations could be looked at, that would be great. I just think this is a bad location. And it's also going to be next to the school bus stop. And thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Guthrie. There is, and Ms. Guthrie, I would like to ask that you put your hand down, please, now, since you have had a chance to speak. Okay, Al D. Seco, please go ahead and address the commission and state your name and address for the record. And then you will be followed by Joaquin Forster. And Mr. DeKiso, you seem to be muted. We cannot hear you.
Okay, how's that?
There you go. We can hear you now. Yep, state your name and address for the record, and then your 3 minutes begin.
Alta Chico, 3877 Mark Place, which is about a little over a quarter mile from the site. And say that I talked months ago, and I confirmed through the news that they are partnering with Starlink. And they told me there's no need for any more cell towers. Number two, we don't want it. It's very close to our home. We already have a person that has seizures and a child, and we don't want this type of technology, which is unproven. It is proven that the perception of the public is that it lowers property values. So I'd like the people that want to put this there to let us know if they're going to compensate us when that occurs and we have property value loss. And that's about it. We oppose it. We are on T-Mobile right now. It's not always perfect, but we're on Zoom right now and it's working great. So we don't need it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I cannot, for whatever reason, I cannot pronounce your name properly, and I don't want to kill it. So thank you for your comments, Al. And I know that in your comments you did bring up health effects, and I want to just tell you that I do understand your concern about the perceived health effects, but as long as the builder of this cell tower is complying with FCC regulations concerning radio frequency emissions, this commission is bound by law not to base any decision on that issue. So I just wanted to let you know, I understand your concern, but for full disclosure, I just want to put that out there. So, but thank you for your comments this evening. And and with that, I'm going to move to Joaquin Forster. Joaquin, this is Chair Ontiveros. If you can hear me, I see you unmuted, which indicates to me that you would like to address the commission. If you can hear me, please address the commission at this time by stating your name and address for the record and then proceeding. Okay, Joaquin, we cannot hear you, but for the record, I have stated that I see you unmuted and I see that you attempted to address the commission, but we cannot hear you. Mr. McNeely, can you hear Mr. Forster?
Madam Chair, no, I don't hear anything. I don't hear anything as well.
Okay, do you have any suggestions? Because I don't want to exclude anyone from this hearing this evening.
If Mr. Forster could put in the chat that he's trying to speak or that he wants to speak, that would let us know it's indicating, but I haven't seen any, I haven't seen any indication.
Can you provide a cell phone number or a phone number for him to call in if his website isn't working?
Sure.
Let me ask what, Mr. Forster, are you able to enter anything into the chat to let us know that you're with us? Okay, okay, we do have a response, and He is with us. He is there. For whatever reason, we are unable to hear you. Mr. McNeely, what do you suggest the best way for him to be able to address the commission this evening?
So, Madam Chair, if his system that he's logged in on isn't working, the other option you can try is calling in cell phone number. So maybe if Marty, if you could paste into the chat there what the cell phone number is that could be that you can call into to get into the meeting on a cell phone.
Okay, Mr. Forrester, we are going to provide you a phone number for you to call in. So please look at the chat and look for that number, please. Okay, Mr. McNeely, I don't see the number being posted for Mr. Forrester yet. Do you?
Give me just a moment, please, Madam Chair.
1 second, and we will get that put in the chat.
Okay.
Hello.
Oh, we're hearing him now.
Oh, you can hear me now?
Mr.
Yep.
Forrester, is that you?
Yes, it is.
All right, we can hear you now. So please state your name and address for the record, and then your 3 minutes will begin. Go ahead.
Okay, my name is Joaquin Forrester. I live at 4093 North Verde Road, which is within a quarter mile of the tower. I just want to say we don't want it and we don't need it. I don't want the RFs. I don't want the interference with my electrical devices. There are far better sites that you could choose on a prominent ridge line to the east, for instance. I don't want the tower there. It's going to be an eyesore. The RFs are not good for health. I know you already mentioned that you're not taking that in consideration or whatever, but it's a pretty big issue. Some people get tinnitus from cell phone towers. It's not good. I don't want it. I don't need it. I'm fine without it. And that's my 2 cents.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Forrester, for those comments. And I know that you mentioned in your comments that I did state that we cannot consider the health effects. So I just wanted to reiterate my previous comments that I have made. So I am looking to see if anybody else. I'm going to make another call, one last call to the public, and ask if anybody would like to address this commission. Please raise your hand or unmute. And I am not seeing any. Mr. McNeely, are you seeing anything that I'm not?
No, I am not seeing any other hands raised or anyone else unmuted.
All right. Okay. With that, I'm going to go ahead and close it to the public and open it at commission level. Commissioner Best, would you start us off this evening?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having in particular really looked hard at the maps that were on the screen a few minutes ago, this just doesn't seem to pass the common sense test. This is in a neighborhood, although it's on commercial property, but it's very close to residences. Our first finding requires that we be consistent with the comprehensive plan, and part of that is compatibility with surrounding neighborhoods. It's not very compatible. There are areas, as Commissioner Wilson pointed out, to the northeast that are in the yellow, not the green. This doesn't help. does seem like a more rigorous search process for a location that would have a higher impact, higher positive impact on reception and less of an impact on the neighborhood would be appropriate. So I'm always interested to hear what the rest of the commissioners say, but that's where I am at this moment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Best. Vice Chair Burton?
At this point, I honestly can't see that they've met the requirement to show that there's a significant gap in coverage. I mean, that's, yeah, I'm of the same mind. Why are the arrays only going one direction? And those are my thoughts at this time.
Okay, Vice Chair Burton, let me ask you this. I'm going to stick very, very closely to our cell tower application evaluation flow chart. And the first thing that we have to decide, Mr. Short, I'm thinking you're getting that up there, aren't you? Ah, there you go, right there. The first question that this commission has to answer is this. Does the proposed cell tower meet local jurisdictions zoning requirements? That means, can we make the findings to approve this? That question has to be answered before the significant gap in wireless coverage or wireless service. At this point, Vice Chair Burton, do you feel that you could make the findings to approve this CUP?
Let me look at the findings of fact. Hang on. I would say barely, but I feel like I could make the findings.
Okay, barely, but could. Okay, so for the first round, I'm going to go ahead and move to Commissioner Wilson next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will answer the question with a no. The cell tower does not meet our local jurisdiction zoning requirements because we're having to waive the requirement for the fall distance. And so for that reason alone, it clearly does not meet it, even though the engineer's explanation says it shouldn't. That's not what our zoning code says. It says it shall not. It doesn't say pending an engineer's interpretation. And I would say that the second question of significant gap coverage, the fact that it fails to cover anything to the north, to me, clearly shows that it is not. So it's my thoughts.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Wilson. Commissioner Ruggles? Commissioner Ruggles, I think you're muted.
Sorry, I missed that. Thank you. First thing I have to state is that I did visit the site with Mr. Short. And the coverage that exists in some areas, I had some pretty good indications from my phone while I was out there because I get a notification every time I go in and out of a cell. It's a little spotty. I can attest to that as it is right now. However, there are other things to consider. One, I would really quickly like to address the generator noise. I took a look at the data from Generac. The generator with a grade 2 enclosure would produce about 71 dBA at full load, measured 23 feet from there. That data makes it pretty easy to do an estimate of sound levels at the property line, and at the closest property line, which would be almost immediately to the west, it would still be 59 dB and dBA. So even though it's only running 15 minutes out of a week, that still poses a problem for some of the neighbors, because there isn't a lot to mask the sound out there. Juniper and pinyon doesn't do very well, require additional sound deadening to get down to 50 dBA at the property line and a reasonable level across the road. Now, in relation to the findings, one of the things that I can't consider is property values. We've been down this road before. We really can't consider that. But there's a lot more than that. When I look at the propagation map and look at what is covered to the north, then, well, that's quite lacking. I am right in there with Commissioner Wilson on his assessment about that, that in terms of finding A, that's a problem. I'm not at all sure I can make finding A, in addition to finding B for similar reasons. So at that point, I'm kind of interested in other opinions from the commissioners this evening before I reach a final conclusion on this. But in my mind, it's not looking very good right now. If we had a proposal before us that widened the commercial intensity or level of the signal to the north and covered more areas up to the north, where it's obviously still going to be spotty, that might revise my opinion a little bit. But at this point, this is where I stand. It doesn't look good.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Ruggles. Commissioner Williams?
Yeah, I'm kind of definitely on the no side of the fence on this one for many of the reasons that have been expressed already. I think the fall distance as a technicality is an issue, and I really do not see that it covers a significant gap. So that would be a no.
Okay, what I'm going to do is I am up next. This is Chair Ontiveros, and I am up next. And I have already made up my mind on this, so I'm going to go ahead and state my position and my reasoning for it. And then I'm going to come back through every commissioner and ask for the decision and also the specific reasoning. The point I'm trying to make here is that rather than saying I cannot make finding number 1, it needs to be followed by I cannot make following number 1 because. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start here, and then we will cycle back through the commissioners. Again, this is Chair Ontiveros, and I'm going to follow the cell tower application evaluation flow chart very carefully. The first question that has to be answered is, does the proposed cell tower meet local jurisdiction's zoning requirements? The answer to me is no. And the reason that I say that is under the findings of fact required to approve a conditional use permit. If we go to number D or number 4, it states that the proposed conditional use is consistent with and conforms to the goals, objectives, and policies of the general plan or a specific plan for the area. This area does not have an area plan, so therefore we go to the comprehensive plan. If you look at policy 6 in the comprehensive plan, I do not see how a 120-foot cell tower is compatible and complementary with surrounding neighborhoods. And I will say that I do realize that this cell tower is being proposed on a commercial site, but it is across the street from a residential area. It is adjacent to a residential area. So I cannot make the findings to approve this CUP to begin with. So then if we follow the chart, since my answer to that is no, I have to answer the question, does the proposed cell tower cover a significant gap in personal wireless service? I have been looking at these before and after maps for, I've spent a lot of time looking at them. And I do not see that there is a significant gap that it is going to cover that. When I think of significant, I think of big and bold, something more than just a, I don't know. All it really does, from what I've seen from before and after, is it simply kind of darkens the green from commercial to residential. And with that, you get a stronger signal. But I still do not believe that the applicant has met the burden to show that there is a significant gap in personal wireless service in this area. So since my answer to that is no, then I go to the local jurisdiction could deny the cell tower. And that is where I am at. My decision is made, and that's where I'm at and my reasons for it. So I'm going to come back and we're going to start with Commissioner Best and go ahead and lay out your decision and the reason for it, please. And be as specific as you can.
This is Commissioner Best. I cannot make the findings. In particular, finding A requires that we be consistent with the objectives of the ordinance, the comprehensive plan. I don't find that this tower is compatible and complementary with the surrounding neighborhoods. I don't see that it closes a significant gap in coverage. And I do not see that there has been a careful examination of other possible sites. And therefore I cannot make the findings, and my vote would be no. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Best. Vice Chair Burton.
Okay, a little more thought after hearing everyone else, and I'm gonna say that I cannot make finding B due to it being a disfavored facility due to its proximity to a residential area, and finding D because of policy 6, it is not complementary to the surrounding neighborhoods. And then outside of that, I also do not see a big enough improvement in coverage to consider it a significant improvement in coverage. So I cannot, my vote will end up being no on this.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair Burton. Commissioner Wilson.
I do not believe it meets our zoning code because of the fall radius. And when we get to the gap coverage, I do not believe it covers, it addresses a significant gap in coverage. And I think this is why having islands of commercial within residential is never a good idea. And so I cannot make the findings.
Okay, so the specific finding that you cannot make is that A, number 1?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Ruggles?
My primary problem would be with making finding A, but a couple of other things I'd like to speak to. Several other commissioners have brought up the fall radius. In the past, when we have had CUPs like this, where there has been a monopole in what would be a rather restricted area, the engineering firm that certified that it would fall within the requirements of the zoning code has provided the design of the tower that would accommodate that. Now, one thing that I was looking for in the applicant's data was exactly that, a flanged and bolted together tower at a point that would guarantee that the fall radius is what the engineer said it would be. I didn't see that. So I have to agree with Commissioner Wilson on that. That is part of the incompatibility with the zoning ordinance requirements. There's no data to support what is being contended that someone like myself can look at and say, yep, I know what you're talking about and why it's going to work that way. Additionally, when we get down to coverage, there is no coverage to the north. So the benefit is considerably diminished to residents in the area north of that. And as I said before, I know how spotty that is just going around the site. I know that's anecdotal data, but it's spotty, you bet. And it doesn't look like there's going to be a big improvement in that. And as such, that is a matter of the lack of compatibility with the neighborhood and what the residents there would get in terms of any benefit from this installation. So that being said, I cannot make findings either A or B with relationship to the CUP here. So I would not vote to go forward with it.
Thank you, Commissioner Ruggles. I believe you did indicate that you cannot make findings A or B, and I believe that you indicated that you do not find it compatible with the neighborhood. Are you also saying that you cannot make finding number D?
That would be the case in this discussion, yes.
Okay, so you might not make findings A, B, or D for the reasons that you have set forth. Okay, thank you.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Ruggles. And Commissioner Williams.
I cannot find for finding A, B, or D, honestly. And I don't think it's in accordance with the objectives of the ordinance, and that the location so close to all the residences is disfavored enough, certainly, to make me not make that finding B. And D. I mean, there is no area plan for this area, but from hearing from the residents, if there was, I don't think this would be something that they would have in it. So, so that's the first part. And then I also don't see any significant increase in coverage. Yeah, I mean, everything to the north still doesn't really have much coverage to speak of at all. So the coverage increase is not that impressive. So I'm a no on this.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Williams. And this is Chair Ontiveros, and I also already stated my position. So with that, let's go ahead and move for a motion for denial of CUP 23-007 and a second, please.
I would like them to make a motion to not recommend approval of CUP 23007 to the Board of Super. Oh, well, this isn't a recommendation. This is
No.
CUP, that we
Yeah, this is
disapprove
denial.
CUP 23007.
I'll second that.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Wilson and a second by Commissioner Ruggles to deny CUP 23007. All in favor, please say aye. Commissioner Best?
Aye.
Vice Chair Burton?
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson?
Aye.
Commissioner Ruggles?
Aye.
Commissioner Williams?
Aye.
And this is Chair Aunt Tavares, CUP 23007. The motion has been denied. The final item on the agenda this evening is a call to the public for items not on the agenda. Is there anyone in the public that wishes to address the commission this evening for items not on the agenda? All right, and seeing none, my clock shows 7:14 p.m. and the meeting is adjourned. So good night, everyone. I will see you all next month.
Thanks,
Good
Chair
night, all.
Tavares. Thanks, commissioners. Have a good month.
Mhm.
Good night, everyone. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Mhm.